Aloha, and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most unfinished work as it releases. I'm Elliot Diebold.
And I'm Malia Webb.
Woo! New surname
Woo!
alert. That's so exciting. And we're coming at you live in the Discord, all that normal blah 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 crap. Who cares? How are you going, Malia? I mean, you're back. You've got a husband now. Like, tell us all about everything.
Jenny was telling me during the wedding weekend, I don't remember if someone asked or what, but she was like, yeah, it's not going to feel different. And it doesn't feel different. There's just like weird appointments that we have to figure out. Like we went to the Social Security office, and so the Social Security office officially thinks of us as the Webbs, and now we have to go to like change our driver's license, and we're gonna have to do the passports and the banks and blah blah blah.
That's
So
so romantic. You make marriage sound just so romantic.
I mean, it was really exciting. And I mean, it's so. My husband and I are both changing. Yeah, that still sounds weird. Okay, my husband and I are both changing our last name. And so it's fun doing it together and kind of getting all excited.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, Tommy B says we made the mistake of changing our names, and that's fair. I think both of us were like, we want the same last name as our kid, and we don't want to like hyphenate it or whatever. And so that was kind of, or as our future children that don't exist yet. But yeah, and so I was like, if I don't get to be Hamilton, you don't get to be Greg. So now we're something new.
Yeah. Well, that's what, yeah, Belle Tal had the same thought I did, which is like my first hope was that you were doing what Jasmine did with Lucy's name and like hybridizing them, because I still think that's the cool. Like, I only learned that was an option from Jasmine, and I'm still kind of obsessed with it.
Yeah, I tried.
Fair.
I mean, years ago, when I would talk with my ex about possibly getting married, we had a good hybrid name that I'm pretty sure we were going to do, but like Greg, so we could have done like Greg or like Gregleton or like Hag. Hag.
I mean, I'm kind of into Hag, but I can see why you wouldn't be after 6 months.
And like so if we have a daughter, we really want to name her Charlotte, and we know that that's mean.
Oh my god, Charlotte Webb,
I think,
though?
Right, I think Charlotte Webb is less mean than Charlotte Hag, so...
Oh, I think most things will be, but less mean for a daughter than the surname of Hag.
Everyone's telling us me not to do it. Thank you, Vice Versailles.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. I was obsessed with Charlotte.
Yeah, but so Webb is Ben's mom's maiden name. And he's really close with that side of the family, and
that's good.
It's a pretty name. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I remember like when my like you were talking about how you had an old ex you were looking at combo names with and stuff. Like I think I mentioned to you the other day, my ex and I were having fights because we talked about the possibility of marriage too before we broke up, and it was like we both wanted to take the other one's name. So it was like an argument about who would get to keep their name because neither of us wanted to. So that was fun. I still maintain hers was the better surname, but anyway, I don't want to.
Out of curiosity, why did she want Diebold? I mean, it's a cool name.
Yeah. I mean, spelling it's always a nightmare though. Like,
right.
And she was a bit more like traditional and conservative than I was, I think. So like, I think there was part of her where she was like, she was more like open to the tradition of the idea of like she was the woman, and so she takes her husband's name or whatever. And I was like, nah, fuck that. Your surname rules.
Okay, cool.
But yeah,
there were. I think the sad, like I tell myself that I'm very like principled or whatever, and that's why I wanted us both to change our names, and that is a big part of it. But there have been people I've had crushes on that I totally would have just taken their last
name. Yeah, 100%. It's like, I don't know, especially if they have a cool name. Like sometimes it's just like, oh, it's a good name, I want it.
Right.
I mean, that was my vibe with my ex.
Right.
So yeah. Gosh, yeah. So I'm just thinking as well. The last time I saw you, so obviously we met in person in Hawaii. That was very exciting. we had sort of a big meet up at the wedding, and I was just
It's
thinking the
so
last
fun.
time I saw you was you and your husband were stalking us at the airport. Um, which, like, to give context to everyone who was listening, we ran into you, I think, twice at the airport on your way to the honeymoon. It was weird.
Well, so the first time we were sort of stalking you, but then the second time y'all snuck up on us. So
Well, I guess that's fair. We were on completely separate flights that just happened to be
mhm.
sharing the same gate at the airport. It was creepy.
Yeah, and apparently Hawaiian Airlines, like the only flight, because we went uh hopping around to the different islands, and the only flight that wasn't delayed was one that we ended up missing because it wasn't delayed because the flight before it fucked us over.
Yeah.
So we were sitting at the gate that was going to be y'all's gate, like waiting for our flight. We
Yeah.
went to Kauai and then the Big Island, and the Australians were all headed to Oahu. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I know where all these places are now because I've either been there or I've watched Lilo and Stitch with the knowledge of the general outline of the islands now. We got drunk and watched Lilo and Stitch one night. It was great.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Kipos is right. Like, because Kipos came too, for those who aren't aware, and Hawaiian Airlines was just having a bad time the whole time we were there. There were like problems with their computer system or something. They were just having a bad time.
Yeah. Ben commented that they were on island time, which made me feel a little bit better, but also no, it was ridiculous. It was so ridiculous.
I thought it was really funny because when we were stuck in this, because the security line was so long, like it was going
It was so
outside the
bad.
airport and like around the corner long. And it was to the point where even the TSA pre-check people had to line up for half an hour. And there's a point in the line where we were near them, but near the area where TSA pre-check people were getting told they had to line up for half an hour. So that was like fun people watching because they did not take it well, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, should we talk about Pale? Or I don't know.
Yeah, unless you wanted to talk about Hawaii more
I
first,
mean,
but we could talk
I'm
about
worried
Pale.
that I won't stop. Is the problem? It was so fun meeting you all and experience. We experienced your culture. We went to an IHOP. We went to a Denny's on Jenny's recommendation. Um, lots of just fun activities.
You had such fun trolling my sister with all the places you threatened to, and then I guess actually did eat sometimes.
Yeah, poor Jenny sent us this list of all these really nice places to eat, but like we as Australians wanted to take advantage of all the chains that we see on TV and in movies, but don't ever get to eat at because they don't exist in Australia. So poor Jenny's telling us about these nice boutique places, and we're like, "Fuck yeah, Olive Garden, and the Cheesecake Factory." Anyway,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, yeah. That kind of reminds me of, so I mean, Hawaii has a lot more chain stuff than it used to, but that was fun going to the mainland back in the day because yeah, Olive Garden was
mm,
very exciting. Um, I feel like I'm a little bit blessed with having somewhat of a resistance to commercials because growing up, like especially all the restaurants, like none of them applied to me. Um, and so being able to go somewhere and be like, "Whoa, there's a Red Robin. What is like this is so exciting."
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's a
100%.
mood.
I mean, that's what it was like for us on Oahu. We were just like, yeah, oh my gosh, like at TGI Fridays. I've heard about this in the office. Let's go. We couldn't get in though because apparently you need to book there.
What?
Anyway, yeah.
Wild.
Oh yeah, and okay. So if people haven't been to Hawaii, I think this is just a Hawaii thing. What's the deal with
Um,
ABC stores? Because there was one every 15 meters in Honolulu. It was crazy. You can't need that many ABC stores.
but why? Surely economics would dictate that there wouldn't be that many if we didn't need.
I mean, this is why I'm so confused. They're just like it was genuinely you couldn't walk a block without seeing one of these ABC stores. Yeah, what is an
Right.
ABC store? You know what?
So
I think it's still a good question. I've seen a million of them and I don't really know what they are.
so
They
I think
sell
that there's some places on the mainland, right, that like are liquor related, and there is a shit ton of liquor sold at ABC stores, but they're in Hawaii, it's just a specific chain. They're almost like a convenience store, but like really touristy.
yeah. That's what I was gonna say. It was like, I think the one, because there was one literally, yeah, you basically had to walk past it to get into the hotel. Well, no, it wasn't quite a hotel. It was like a timeshare place. That was
Hmm.
weird. But it was like one third tourist shop, one third like 7-Eleven, and then one third like a deli out the back. It was,
Yeah.
and then they were kind of all like that, with or without the deli. Some were half tourist
Yeah.
shop, half 7-Eleven, um, which is like a fine kind of shop, but there were so many of
Everywhere.
them. It just,
Right.
and I mean, I bought a hat, so I'm not helping. Like, I gave them the money, but yeah.
It's one of my go-to places for when I wanna buy gifts for people when I come to Hawaii,
Mm,
because there's just,
mhm.
there's towels, there's, like, a little hula girl, whatever the hex,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think that must be it. I think Hawaii is just so tourist driven that the fact that the 7-Elevens will have tourist things, it's half the store, just kind of works. Yeah, like as Kip was saying, we both bought gifts there for people. So yeah, I don't know why I'm saying it doesn't make sense, because we did exactly that.
Yeah,
Um,
Jenny would tell me about, I don't know if this was a joke or why this was happening, because I don't you're not allowed to drink in the streets, but she would say something about when she was in college, on Oahu, that, people would like to play a drinking game where every time you pass an ABC store, you would drink. I think, like,
you'd die.
they would walk around downtown or something, I don't know.
That sounds deadly. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not healthy.
Yeah, which is why I'm not sure if it was just sort of like a joke or if people actually did it, but
Yeah, that sounds horrible. You wouldn't make it like 200 meters. Um, oh god,
no.
yeah. But it was so funny. Yeah. So we were staying in Ohio. I don't know if I've told you this story yet. But we didn't realize it's actually not primarily a hotel. It's like a place for timeshares, and they just lease out the empty rooms as like hotel rooms on Booking.com.
Hmm.
So we get to this hotel, and either Ruben didn't tell us this, or we just, we somehow, the rest of us weren't aware. So there was like this thing where it was like, here are all the activities you can do while you're staying here, and we're like, oh hey, hell yeah! And one of them was like free mai tais,
Mm.
and so we went there, and these mai tais were so strong. And then there was a guy who was coming around and pouring extra shots of Malibu into your mai tais if you wanted. So in about 10 minutes, Kipos, Ruben, and I just absolutely plastered. Like in 10 minutes, we've had about 8 standard drinks each. Thank God Penny wasn't drinking, because after about 15 minutes, this lady comes out and starts selling timeshares and like putting the seller. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so drunk. And I'm bad enough at conversations like this already. I'm worried I'm going to awkward buy a timeshare. So I just got up and left as this lady was talking. I was like, I'm so rude, but like, I'm gonna buy a timeshare if I stay here. I'm too drunk. And so I like ran out to the elevator before anyone could stop me, and like Penny was already there, like bashing the down. But so funny. And then we walked to the Cheesecake Factory to sober up. But yeah. So that was our timeshare story. How we almost bought a timeshare in Hawaii.
Oh my god. That's so unethical.
Yeah, I mean, it was so funny because, like, at the start, I was like, "Wow, they're giving us so much alcohol. That's weird." And then, as soon as the lady came around, and started handing out pamphlets on all the benefits of the timeshare, I was like, "Oh, that makes sense. I see what this is."
Yeah, 'cause I was when you were like, "Oh, they're so strong," I was like, "That's weird," because normally you think they'd put, like, a
Yeah,
tiny bit
it was
of
free. Like,
alcohol
yeah, yeah.
if
Like
it's
it,
yeah.
all the signs were there. This is that sort of thing where, like, how in the other verse, you need to leave clues for like incarnate rituals or
Mm,
glamour and stuff.
mhm.
All the clues were there. We just didn't put them together until it was too late.
I mean, yeah, I would have liked to go for free Mai Tais, so
Yeah, I mean, we had a great time. We managed to get out just in time. Yeah, that's fair. Not too late. Too late that it wasn't embarrassing that I didn't put it together when I did. But anyway. Oh, and sorry, one last Hawaii thing. I promise I'll shut up soon about it. But I do want to call out. I'm not going to say who it was, but we weren't. There's somebody who's probably listening to this very soon,
well,
And it is this person. This person listens to Pale Reflections in what I would describe as the weirdest way imaginable. And I didn't get a chance to call them out in person, so I'm just going to put them on blast in the podcast, which is unfair, but I'm
Perfect.
doing it. This person will be an arc behind in Pale, but apparently listens to Pale Reflections as it comes out.
Why?
So they were like, "Oh yeah, I don't know what happens in the back half of Arc 23." Well, I kind of do. It's been kind of spoiled because I'm still listening to the podcast. And I just need to say, I think that, well, frankly, I think it's weird that people listen to this podcast in general, but then also, like, people listen to it in weird ways. But that's the new weirdest I've heard. So that person, I presume, is hearing this in a couple of days. And to you, I just want to say, I didn't get a chance to ask you this in person, and I want to know, why are you like this? That's so strange to me.
I mean, based on their food habits, this is very on brand for just like
I
inexplicable.
guess. I just, that is the wildest way to experience Pale to me, is like via our bastardized interpretation of it. Like, read the story. You have time to listen to the podcast. You have time to read the story, I think. Anyway, sorry. So I just had to get that out of my system. That's the new weirdest way to listen to the show that I've heard. But feel free to hit us up in the Reddit thread if you've got an even weirder one. I mean, some of you listen on YouTube. I still don't understand what that's about.
That is weird. Don't hit us up in the YouTube comments. We won't see it.
Yeah, only Scott gets the YouTube comments. So you're
Right.
basically talking to Scott if you comment on any of our YouTube videos, just as a heads up. And now I'm actually regretting saying that because maybe some people will use that as a tool. But
To
yeah,
get Scott
you
to
know.
read Pale.
Yeah, I mean, that's an ethical use of badgering him, actually. So that's fine.
I answered a question on King Sling. I don't answer them normally because on King Slingers, because I don't know. They're usually don't think of anything, but there was something about like inanimate objects that come to life and murder people in Stephen King or something, and I was like, "There's this murder truck in Pale. You should read it." And like, it was like one sentence, like, "Read Pale."
I mean, you know, that's our brand, right? That's fine. It's on brand. That was actually,
Indeed.
sorry, I do want to say the the worst part of the wedding for me was the fact that everybody knew us as the podcast people and would ask us to explain what our podcast was. And I find that's not only embarrassing, but also I feel like I'm embarrassingly bad at it. It's like, okay, so there's this web serial. And it's like people would be like, "What's Malia's podcast about?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, you know that web serial. There's another web serial, and you kind of need to have read both." It's very difficult, like, because people are like, "I want to listen to Malia's podcast," and it's like, there is some homework you will have to do first.
I've gotten to the point where I think, at least, I don't know if he still does, but at least one of my friends was just like, "I'm gonna listen," and I was like, "What?" And then he like talked to me about it another time, and he is not reading them. So it was like, okay.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Strike, you joke, but that's kind of what it was like. It was like, those are the podcast people. And I think, I don't know if you did this on purpose, but I feel like we were at the special interest table. Like, because our table, I won't say their names, but
Oh.
we were with some of your Disney friends. And so it was kind of
Uh-huh.
like, we got to trade obsessions, which was fun. Like, we told them all about Wild Bow stories, and they told us all about, I learned a lot about Disney theme parks that night,
Oh,
which was
that's
cool.
that's the best. I mean, as y'all know, I love talking about Disney stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of the tables, were friend groups where there were just, yeah, like, slightly more people, and so it wasn't on purpose, but I am glad. When y'all came up
Yeah.
with, like, my Disney friends and were like, "We're taking a picture in the photo booth," I was like, "Oh, cool, like, friends."
Yeah. Well, like, one of them has been to every Disney park in the world, and she was like, "This is the best Pirates of the Caribbean ride, but this one is the
Damn.
best." Like, other, it was just like, she was just a walking encyclopedia of Disney theme parks, and it was really awesome. Like, she was great to talk to. Except then she kept asking me to talk about Pale, and I was like, "No, I want to learn all this niche Disney stuff."
No,
Like,
no, no, we don't have
apparently,
that much time.
yeah, apparently I've got to go to Shanghai if I like Pirates of the Caribbean, because that's the best Pirates of the Caribbean ride.
Okay, I buy that.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying what the experts told me.
Yeah, it's
Um,
definitely on my list to go to all of them someday, but
my list is just, I want to go to that Nintendo World in either Japan or California.
well, I think they're making one in Florida. Not that that is
Oh,
closer for
okay.
you, but I'm excited.
Yeah, one of oh yeah, I mean, I just want to go to one of them. Yeah, I've just got to save up for traveling now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, that was fun. Yeah, it was so funny trying to explain to people what pale is. I'm realizing even after all this time, I'm still like, I think I'm too close to the story to try and summarize what it is.
Yeah, I think that, a couple months after it finishes, it'll be a little bit easier to kinda say, like, "Yeah, Pale's about this." I think,
Yeah,
like, 3 Magical Girls, uh
I still focus on the murder mystery because I feel like that's fun. Like as like the start of the story pretends that's what the whole story is going to be, and maybe at one point it was, but like
Mhm.
for Pales, but I find I'm just bad at explaining what the other verse is. It's like, people can't
Yeah.
lie, and that's actually really cool. It's cooler than I'm making it sound, I promise. Like just stuff like that. Anyway, but yeah, it was just funny having to explain our podcasts to so many people because it's like, okay, this is gonna sound weird, but
Yeah, yeah. I did get very excited and say, like, "People I've never met are flying across the ocean for this
yeah, I
one."
think your mum was like telling us that you seemed more excited for us to be there than some of the like family friends, and she was a bit irked about that, which was a very nice thing for her to say, and that was very funny. And your mum is exactly like what I expected from the podcast, which was
Perfect.
exactly, yeah, perfect. She was a lot of fun.
The, yeah, I remember mentioning to Kippos at one point that, like, I talk to y'all more than I do a lot of like, my friends from undergrad, I really love them, but, like, I don't talk to basically anyone at the wedding on nearly as regular a basis except for my husband, my sister, and my mom. Like, y'all are, like, very much more in my life, which was funny to realize.
Yeah, I mean that's the post-COVID world in a way, though, I guess, isn't it? Like it's the
Mhm.
online. I talk to my online friends a lot more than any real life ones for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Gosh, well, okay. I think unless there's any more Hawaii/wedding talk you want to get into, maybe we should talk about Pale. Half an hour into the podcast.
Yeah, no, let's start it, and maybe at the end, um, we'll come back. Uh,
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come up in the meantime. Were there any scuba stories? I don't. There were more. There was a bad scuba story, but overall, scuba was fine. Um, so yeah, great scuba diving in Hawaii. That's my hot take on scuba diving in Hawaii. Turns out it's really good. I didn't see a turtle. That's crazy to me. But anyway,
That's crazy!
everyone on the trip saw a turtle except for me, and I'm the one who went scuba diving. So I don't know what
That's
that's about.
crazy. Well, you just have
Anyway,
to come back.
yeah, I kind of want to. So yeah. Um. Anyway. Okay. Uh. Last chance for pre-Hawaii stuff. Otherwise, fan art contest results came out while we were gone. Probably slower than they should have because we were all in Hawaii. But go check it out. A song won. It's a really cool song. I love it. There was also some great Ben and Dee Dee fan art, which I love. So check it out.
Mhm.
Yeah, I should have bought that timeshare so I had an excuse to go back. That's a good point. Um, okay. Finish off 24.2. We're going. This is how far behind we are.
Woo!
It's an Avery chapter. We're picking up right where 24.a before it left off. Avery gets the signal that Charles is locked in his own special little hell with Percival 2.0, and so the Kennetiers move to kickstart their pitch meeting, even though not everyone has arrived.
Yeah,
And
I forgot that this is where we were going because I remember looking and seeing, um, an Avery chapter and a Lucy chapter or no, a Verona chapter in your notes, and I was like, "No, I don't think you went back quite far enough," because I was thinking of, like, the Verona, Avery, Lucy that we get in order, and then I was like, "Oh, yeah, this chapter." So that was fun to jump into. Um, Big meeting trying to convince the shitty practitioners to be better.
Yeah, it's like a fun sort of like Avery because you sort of jump in. It's the Avery chapter, and we're having the big meeting, and you're like, well, that makes sense. Like this is sort of, everyone's coming together. Of course, we're going to kind of get that through the Avery lens. That's her
Mhm.
whole jam. She's the people wrangler. Um, there's all these arrivals and departures happening in the chapter. Um,
Mhm.
my biggest thing is I was kind of like reading this and I was like, it's a bit of a shame that we did our whole like 3-year anniversary recap just before this chapter, because this is a chapter where it feels like the story is doing that a little bit. Like we see
Mhm.
so many old faces, and we talk about a lot of old, like, this is the story doing kind of its own version of that, and like bringing a lot of stuff back into the story and like using them. Like, it sort of feels like we're gathering, well, I mean, everyone, that's kind of the point. Everyone's finally working together.
Right. And then um I have this note somewhere, possibly in the next chapter, but it does feel I it was more in rereading it for this podcast that I realized this, so I'm not sure if this is consistent, but it feels like we're throwing back to the beginning of the story a lot more. And I mean, that makes sense that when we mention, Estrella or the Kierstadts or like these people that like we will, it's just way too long. It's good for Wildbow to give us a little reminder of like that's who this
Mm,
is. And so like
yeah.
that is going to involve a lot of callback, but then we get the whole breakdown of the Alexander Bristow
Yes.
Musser history. And there's a reference next chapter about Snowdrop burning down the Blue Heron. And then like Verona even thinks about like chapter 1.3 or whatever, like their first night as practitioners. And it
Yeah.
feels like we're really like I mean, this feels like it's nearing the end of the story is a fun
But you
joke in
can't
this
say that. You
story.
you can't you can't
Right.
say that, Malia.
And I didn't, but it does feel like we're kind of like bringing things back
Sure.
and like making
100%.
a circle. Um
Yeah.
yeah, which may or may not be related to like the feeling of a story ending or coming together. But
No, I
yeah.
agree. That's definitely the vibe I got. But should we go through all the assembled people here? Because it's fun seeing a lot of old faces, some who we have seen fairly recently, but just kind of, it's like, yeah, this chance to catch up on where everyone in the region's at. So I'll start us
Yeah.
off with yeah, the first, and to be fully transparent, Malia did kind of put this list together. I'm just reading it. So thank you for doing that. But yeah, we'll start with
Yep.
I guess the in kids, the cool kids. It's Nicolette, it's Zed, it's Bree, it's Raquel. The reformed establishment practitioners, I guess.
Yeah, I tried to kind of group these people based on like vibes.
Like vibes, yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's really fun thinking about because like I mean for a really long time, Nicolette, Zed, and Bree have felt like you know absolute best friends. Like Mensch is like on side,
yeah,
and Raquel is a little bit shakier just because she hasn't been like quite as on side and
yeah. It
doesn't
took her a
have
bit longer.
right. And like she's pretty close with Avery, but not necessarily the other two. Um, but these are all like enemies to friends,
Yeah,
antagonists to friends. Like it's fun again as we're pulling things back um from the beginnings of the story to have these and it's just always so comforting. Like Nico, Zed, and Bree in particular feel like the older siblings or whatever who like have the
mm,
Kenneteers back and whenever they're
yeah,
around I just feel like safer. Um
100%. Like for 20 arcs now, almost 15 arcs at least. I've just always trusted Nico, Zed, and Bree to the point where if one of them stabbed us in the back at some point, I would be shocked. Like, I think the older sibling call out is great. Like, I would absolutely feel like the Kenneteers can and should just lean on these three whenever they can, like that.
mhm. Um, and one name that sadly doesn't get added to this list, but also good for her, is Jessica, who notably does not show up. Who notably like has kept her prize as like out of the story.
Yeah, smartest practitioner in the story.
Right? She's like, no, I'm good. Which is kind of a bummer, but also fair and fun that they tried.
Yeah. No, when we did that practitioner tier list, it all packed up 1.5. I remember the highest tier we had was Escape to the Story, and we had Y in it. And obviously, we're going to have to knock him out of there. He got dragged in kicking and screaming. But Jessica has earned, I think, the top spot in that top tier of Escape to the Story
Definitely.
because she got the hell out. And, like, yeah, all credit to a genius move. Um, yeah. I do also I kind of like I think the fun thing about like Nicolette, Zed, and Bree and Raquel is like I think all four of them step up and they're here, they're helping the Kenneteers and they're helping this plan because as all of them call out, they were like the people who were losing in the old system. Like they were various
Mm,
kinds of aware shit on practitioners. and like they're exactly the sort of people who Kennet and the Kennetiers help, and who their plan is going to help. But I also do feel like, especially these four in particular, are like getting just this sort of massive boost in like power and renown just because of their affiliation with the Kennetiers. Like the Kennetiers are just
Mm.
kind of big deals now, and the fact that Nicolette and Zed are people that they lean on regularly just kind of makes Nicolette and Zed bigger than they might otherwise be. Maybe not
Mhm.
for Zed, I guess, because he was already Ray's apprentice, but like I could just imagine 10 years from now, Nicolette is going to be like even more important than Alexander ever was,
Hmm.
mostly just because she made friends with the Kennetiers in Arc 3 of this story, you know? Like,
Oh, that's
it's
really interesting, right.
like just, you know, it'll be her, like, she does good work, she works hard, so it's not, like, entirely the Kennetier thing, but it's gonna be, like, this opportunity she mostly got just because she was the first practitioner the Kennetiers latched onto.
Right. I and, like, you pointed out, I feel like now my brain is, like, swirling about Nico, Zed, and Bree, and, like, I wanna do some sort of, like, 5-paragraph essay on them or something, which is my level of, uh, analytical skill, but just, yeah, like, they were all aware who became practitioners and, like, have all had really awful things in their lives that, like, led them to being aware and are now
Mm,
practitioners and all went from antagonist to not. I mean, Bree is fascinating because her introduction is Avery saving her, um, which then comes
yeah.
around and kind of like it leads to like Reagan's death, and like that feels weird, but also Reagan probably would have died anyway. I don't know. It's just I love them. Um,
Yeah, and I think with Nico's, or with Nico and Bree in particular, I feel like the better they're doing, the more successful they are, the more they're just walking, talking examples of exactly what Kennet is pitching here, where it's like these are aware who are getting shit on by the existing system. Like, you know, that things weren't getting better for them the more
mhm,
aware and the more awoke they got. And Kennet has kind of fixed that. Nicolette probably being the premier example of that. She's doing a lot better now than she was under Alexander, I'd argue. Um,
right.
so yeah, they are like, you know, and I think we're going to get to talk about that a lot. I think a lot of the people we're about to go through who are at this meeting are kind of examples of why Kennet's system is good. Um,
Mhm.
and in fact, I'd like to launch us straight into one of the good examples of that, which is our old friend Florin Pesh, who's here playing
Woo!
his games.
It's Florent being back is so good. I remember when we meet him in Thunder Bay, and I don't know if I like I feel like I totally bought into his bullshit. Like I feel like I was just
Hmm.
like, this is a good dude who's trying like his best but like to do his best by Avery, and I'm totally in on it. And people were like, no, he seems bad. And I was like, no. And it's just so like him kind of sitting there. He's kind of like, his own little island. Obviously like a plant in the audience. He like sits up with his tea to like signal that things are happening. Like I'm just like, we stand Florin.
Absolutely, he's clearly problematic as fuck, but I love him. Like, he's like an even more fun version of Alexander.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, like, again, but this is the thing, right? Like, it is like Kennet takes people like this, and like Florin is being good with like he's not in an ideal world. I don't think you have that many people like Florin, because I think Florin would be willing to be kind of a shit if that was what was best for him. But like Kennet creates systems where him being good is what's best for Florin, and so he's good because Florin will do what is the most fun and what is the best for Florin. It's like that. It's a different angle to Nico, but it's another good example of why Kennet's system is good, because they incentivize you to be good, and that's what a lot of people like Florin need.
Right.
Um,
Um
I mostly feel bad for Avery though, because she used her fate, like she called in that favor that Florin owes her for this, and like we see him here, and part of me's like, he would have done this for free, I reckon. Like this is exactly the shit he lives for. The thing we know about Florin is he just loves to play these games. Like Avery shouldn't have wasted her favor on this. She should have just given him the lowdown, and he might have done it for free.
yeah, I think that this is such a important meeting that she wanted to make sure that he was going to be like on side and not just shit stir, but also, yeah, he's having so much fun.
Yeah, this should be half the favor tops. She should still have half a favor, I reckon. Like he's enjoying this far too much for it to be a favor to Avery, if you ask me.
Yeah. Um, but speaking of Avery, Another group that we have is the Garricks.
Yep. Who feel like another people who are going to get a massive power and renown boost by proxy of the Kennetys. Like, it
Mhm.
has been so good for the Garricks that they hitched their wagon to Avery. You know, invasion by technomantic others aside. Um,
Right. I think the promenade and some things were
yeah,
completely worth it. Um, like,
100%.
'cause they w they went from being, like, this interesting family that has, like, weird on the fringes stuff, and, like, we didn't see a ton of examples of them transporting people, like,
Yeah,
earlier on in the story, we see Avery getting other people through paths a little bit, but now they're just total, like, transport system. Like, everything that they're doing is like, "Oh, we're taking a path now," and it's awesome, and yeah,
yeah. Yeah, like,
um
and again, like another, like similar-ish to Raquel, just like a, or I guess to jump ahead in the list you've made here a little bit. We obviously there's a bunch of lesser notable practitioners here. Like there's Andrea Fulton, Verona's pseudo mom. The Driscolls are here. The Kierstads, the Knoxes, like all these bottom tier families, basically, who like are the families that are incentivized to get in on the Kenneteer system because it's actually kind of a better offer than what they were getting from people like Musser in a lot of ways. And I think the
Mhm.
Garricks fit into that kind of vibe too, where it's just here's another kind of minor practitioner family who have been problematic, but are extremely susceptible to that Kennet system of incentivizing you to be good because being those lower tier practitioners, they just want solidity and they want safety in their ability to gather power, and they don't kind of have that yet, so they're the most susceptible to just sort of the offer of somewhere like Kennet. And like,
Right,
the Garricks are the furthest along on that line, like thanks to making deals with Kennet, they've got the promenade now, and so like, it's sort of like this is the shit you get when you sign on with the Kenneteers.
right. It's interesting thinking that, like, the families you just listed, I think, are basically all, like, non-combat focused, or at least, like, that's
Hmm.
not, like, the center of their thing, and that's really gratifying, and kind of funny considering the fact that, like, I mean, Lucy made a sword moot, like, she made an entire, like, war council, but the people who are being, like, lifted up are still nicer parts of the practice. Um,
Yeah, well, and the more background, like most of that list of those lower tier families are the ones hanging out with Verona next chapter. Like
right.
it's the people who their practices are like, because yeah, the combat practices, they're the ones where you get power by going out and getting shit done, stabbing people or whatever the fuck.
Mhm.
Whereas these are the practices that are more involved in networking, gathering, that sort of thing, and like, of course, those ones are going to be just more susceptible to what Kennet's pitching, which is diversity and community.
Right.
Um, and I think it's interesting to compare the way the Kenneteers are wedding Kennet and their strategy to all these establishment practitioner families when, like, obviously Charles is kind of doing something similar, right? Like, Charles has just
Mm.
married himself to the establishment via London, but he, like, picked the most establishmenty, shitty establishment, whereas Kenneteers kind of presenting this offer and getting the good parts of the establishment to join them. Like, they're fixing the establishment as they go, as opposed to Charles.
Right. Because they thinking back to, like, the sword move, it was interesting that they really needed the buy-in,
Mhm.
from the top players, but they also, like, didn't want them to be able to just control it. Like, the offering second chances, but also, like, holding people accountable to be better. Um, yeah, it creates an incentive structure where people like Florin and Anthem and whoever can just, like, be better. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, I don't know where it is in the notes. Oh, yeah, there it is. Speaking of Grayson, like, let's just get him out of the way. First of all, him and Anthem, like, because yeah, Grayson's a dick in all this, and he leaves eventually, and it's like good riddance. But also, I'm seeing my Anthem and Jasmine ship disappear before my very eyes because Anthem and Grayson have something going on, right? Like, I don't even want to call it homosexual subtext. It's just there.
Yeah, I'm not sure, like, how into it Anthem is necessarily, but Grayson is so obsessed with this man.
Yeah, like, get a room. Like, it was, yeah, because like I remember this came up during the sword moot. Lucy was a bit like, "Why does this always get a little bit gay?" And like it always, every time these two are on screen together, I'm thinking if there's that the Community episode where like Britta has a whole thing where she's like, "Men just fight to release their pent up gayness," and like
Huh.
Gra- Grayson and Anthem are making a really solid case for that argument every time they're on screen together. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but yeah, so the other thing I wanted to talk about, just when we're talking about all these little practitioner families and like the sort of practitioner establishment marrying Kennet here, um, it is really fun to think about, and it's the sort of thing. Hopefully, somebody, maybe Megafire, will do an essay on at some point, where it's like practitioners have been used as metaphors for all kinds of power in this story, but and the other stories, but there's like a lot of police and lawmaker and lawyer stuff specifically. Like practitioners have been tied to those three uh, jobs a lot.
Mhm.
And it's I think it's really interesting here. Like the Kennetys are really suggesting a huge shift in that dynamic. Like there's a lot of defund the police energy in this. I think. Um,
Hmm.
with how they're sort of shifting the makeup from like combat practitioners being violent police and that sort of thing to like, yeah, like it's a much more community focused law enforcement and law making and law arguing sort of world. And I think that's somebody who's smarter than me about that stuff could probably write something really clever about it.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. And yeah, um they're also trying to reform sentencing. Um
Yeah, yeah,
like, lowering the penalties for lying or breaking a promise or whatever. Like uh that's cool.
hell yeah, yeah. Um, Gosh, so continuing to go through this list because we are taking a while. The next one we had down here were the various others. So there's Toad Slaws here. Soot Sleeves is obviously hosting. Matthew, I suppose it's arguable whether he counts as an other at this point, but like he's hosting, so he like in a different way to Soot Sleeves, he's hosting with a capital H.
Right.
So
Oh,
he's
that's
part
funny.
other.
I really hesitated on whether to, because I was trying to sort of like, yeah, group people and not just do a huge list. And I
Yeah,
really
I think he
hesitated because I'm
belongs.
like,
Yeah,
but he doesn't, he belongs with like the Kennet
others.
council-ish, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah,
Even though he is more practitioner again, uh, he's still.
yeah.
I really did hesitate though, and I was like, putting him by himself seems dumb, so I'm just sticking him
Yeah, I think in my head, like this group of others sits right next to obviously like another group that's further down our list is like the newly aware. So we've got like
Mhm.
the awareness, the kids from school, um, and all that sort of stuff. And like, because this is, I think the big vibe of the pitch that we'll get into in a bit here is like Kennet is kind of really making open and very textual and clear to everyone their whole vibe. Like I think it's been, there have been plenty of enemies in this story who have misunderstood what Kennet is about, and this is them really sitting down and saying, okay, this is what Kennet is. We've like here are the practitioners we've improved. Here are the others that we're helping. We've got like aware that we're bringing in now. Like we believe in diversity. We believe in equality. Like we believe in people being able to grow and all that sort of shit. And
Mhm.
it's just like this is one of those big moments where you sort of like, oh, this is maybe approaching the end of the story because it's like it was really bringing in like that is what Kennet has been about since Arc One, but it's sort of reached the point where now they can gather all the powers in the region and sort of be like, this is what we're about. We're doing it. We're making it real. Get on board or fuck off.
Mhm.
Like that's just a really cool energy.
Yeah, and it's I don't know, it's wild all the change they've been able to make and how
Mm,
it feels really earned. Um, but yeah, how
yeah.
expansive it's got. Like the idea of, "Oh, we're gonna make our region aware and it's gonna be great." Like is like, yeah, okay, but like, 2 arcs ago if you'd said that, it would have been like, "What the crap?" Like, but it's the scale
Yeah.
and the whole they really like they really mean everyone, and like the innocent slash aware were kind of the last piece of
Yeah.
like incorporating the entire society, um, and helping fix it.
But I think
Uh,
yeah, like what contributes to it feeling earned is like conceptually there isn't a huge gap between like Miss's original vision for what Kennet was when it was like 12 others and they had to awaken 3 kids to where we are now. Like it's the same ethos just dialed up to 11 in terms of who the Kenneteers are including, and then also like what they're able to do with it.
Mhm.
um and we've had things like, something that sort of comes up here is we had Bristow invade with his aware in like arc 5, and even then they're like, we weren't putting those puzzle pieces together, but we were getting introduced to the idea that aware were these sort of loopholes where you could throw them in and not really be responsible because the seal didn't really count them, and they were sort of an edge case, and they were
Mhm.
introduced to us as like weird leaks in the seal. And it's like, yeah, here we are 20 arcs later, and the Kenneteers have sort of identified where to take that information and push it forward. And so it's like, it's this thing that we have been building to the whole story, and that's why you're kind of like, yeah, it feels right.
Mhm. Yeah. Thinking about this sort of thing does make me worry slash wonder about like no system is perfect. And
Mm,
this one that they're like trying to build and do seems really good. But reminds me of, yeah, those fantasy stories where it's like, and then, you know, 300 years later,
yeah.
like it's shit because they didn't foresee like these 7 things and they were really good, but then other people sucked and like blah blah blah. And it's like I really don't want that story. Like that makes me feel frustrated and upset. But also uh more on the lookout for potential problems. And I haven't come up with any, but it is interesting.
Well, I mean, in a way, that's kind of the story we're already telling, because that's what the seal is, right? Like, I think
Right.
I would argue that it's, from the sounds of it, when the seal was instituted, that was a really fucking good idea, because it
Mhm.
sounds like a lot of others just hunted people for sport,
Right.
and hunted each other for sport, and the world was kind of shit. And it's like the world grew, and yeah, there were unforeseen problems with the seal, and now it's a problem that needs to be fixed. And I feel like this is a sort of big thing that Lucy's talked about with like vigilance and stuff. Is like Kennet's system is kind of, don't lock anything in permanently. It should all be about
Mhm.
like vigilance and like staying on top of it. Because yeah, like hopefully that's where Kennett's ideas are different. Is they're not necessarily trying to get the perfect setup that will exist for eternity, because they know that shit changes. It's about getting what works now and making sure it can continue to evolve.
Right.
So
Um
like, fingers crossed that doesn't get like taken over by shit people at some point and abused, which is obviously always a concern. Um,
right. Well, cuz I think
yeah,
about the um
2016 US election.
yeah, well, also, like, the US Constitution, I took a class on,
Yeah,
um, a lot of not the, like, things people think of in terms of, like, the amendments and whatever, but, like, the structural aspects of the Constitution and, like, why some of them are fucked. Um, but, like, every alternative has problems and loopholes and whatever, and
yeah,
but then we when class, it was kinda like I don't remember if it was Jefferson or Madison, but, like, one of those dudes was like, "Oh, it'd be cool if every, like, 20, 25 years we all came together or whatever and, like, redid it." Like, redid the whole thing, and it was like, "What if
that
like,
makes
can we
sense.
call a constitutional convention, and, like, what could we do?" But then when you think about the current, like, American political system, like
Do you want them to be able to do that?
right, like, they could make
Yeah,
it so much worse, um, and, like but they could also make it so much better, and just yeah, so those, like, kinds of fears about something not being stable means that other people later can, like, mess it up. But it does seem like, the seal was, like, a dramatic reaction to the horrible, scary wilderness filled with Bjorkmen and all that crap.
yeah,
And so they needed to, like, lock that shit down. And this doesn't like, Charles seems like a crazy reaction to whatever, but the Kenneteers
yeah,
are kind of like, "No, the seal has a lot of really, really good shit going for it, but it also has problems, and let's try to fix those." Um, as opposed
yeah,
to, like, a huge pendulum swinging reaction.
yeah. Because like, there's not. I guess the thing is, because yeah, as you were sort of saying before, with something like the sword moot, there's the risk that Lucy gathers everyone together to build this thing, and then the people who are in power are able to build a flexible but shit system. Like, really, all that separates the Kenneteers from somebody bad doing this is that we like what the Kenneteers are building, right? But like, there's no reason that there isn't a version of the Kenneteers who are doing a shit version of the same thing. Like, oh, we're going to build
Mhm.
a province-wide HOA that incorporates all the aware, but also we have a bunch of shit rules that everyone hates.
Mhm.
Like you're right. You can't protect a system from kind of being shit, except through just kind of hoping that overall the good parts of it are the stronger ones that are able to do stuff. And I guess that's where Kennet's part of like trying to incentivize good behavior and community will hopefully always mean that the good people are the ones always making these calls and calling these shots.
Right.
So you don't
Like
you don't end up with bad prime ministers and stuff. Yeah,
like, you really need Lucy and Anthem to win that fight, and, like,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
scary because they really maybe could have not.
Yeah,
Um,
but I guess hopefully once the good people are calling those shots or in power, they can help make the system so good people will continue to do so and continue to be a good definition of good in the future, like as needs evolve.
mhm,
But it's risky. I mean, yeah, I think you're right. Like it's almost ludicrous to think that you could create something that will still be good in 300 years. You've just got to hope you can tilt the cards in your favor.
mhm.
But yeah, I guess yeah. Speaking of, I don't know, idiots ruining stuff. Thunder Bay's here. Um, we've got Deb, we've got Anne and her daughter, we've got Otis. Thea is here, which I was very excited about.
Mhm.
Deb's best friend Nicole, the Abyssal Cow owner. Avery's no, it was Lucy's best friend Sebastian.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I just like I love Thunder Bay. They're all so dramatic. Like I think they were introduced in Arc 14 as kind of like this is what a normal practitioner establishment looks like. And so it's really fun to see how they're responding to Kennet and Kennet's plan because it's kind of a way of saying this is how normal places will react to it once they've seen it and talk to people like Avery. But also they're just fun because they're all idiots.
Well, it's fun because, yeah, thinking of them as, like, kind of an average counselor, whatever, but then, like, you throw, like I mean, just, Deb and Ann specifically, like, you throw these dickheads in with everyone else, and they are so, like, obnoxious and full of it and awful, and, like, to a degree that, like, only Grayson really rivals. Even, like, Mrs. Graubart isn't this bad. Like, everyone else is, like,
Yeah.
way
But it's that
which
it's
is
that like
part of their charm, but, like, holy shit.
it's that tall poppy syndrome, right? Of just like you go to any local parent teacher group in a small town, and I guarantee you're going to find a Deb and an Ann in there somewhere. Like, like I think what's great, like Thunder Bay are a bunch of overdramatic idiots, but they're actually a perfect representation of what a town of 50,000 people has sitting in it in these sorts of minor positions of power. I think it
Mhm.
absolutely holds up.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Um, but just oh my god. I mean, one of the fun things is that, like, Deb and Anne are good at what they do, and so, like, while they're, like, shitheads and they're bad at working with others and, like, there are a lot of problems, there's the kind of, like, well, it is nice that they're here because, the storm or Anne
Mm,
fighting the ordinary family or, like, there's these aspects where it's like, "Oh, yeah, okay, they are
worth keeping around.
competent." Right, it's not like, "Oh, we just really need to get rid of you," but also, holy crap. Also, I remembered next chapter made me think of Mrs. Ferguson, um,
Yeah,
because she's mentioned briefly and, like, "Where is she?" Like, bring her
I was thinking that
back,
too.
like, that'd
The
be so
mum,
fun.
the myth, the legend, like, we're gathering all the elementalists and you didn't bring, the glorious leader and her son. Uh long shall he reign? Like, yeah. I just
Uh, she would've been so much better to have around than Deb. Uh,
I know. But she would have made Deb and Nicole even more insufferable. So
yeah.
maybe it's not worth it.
Nicole did a pretty decent job at, like, being fine.
And handling Deb. Yeah, I agree. Deb makes Nicole look reasonable, which is fun.
I
Because it takes
know.
Deb, I think, to do that.
Mhm.
Uh, I also I have to call out Anne and Deb. We'll get to it in more detail later, but they first start cooking this idea for the storm, and they're like, "Oh, should we do the usual?" Yes, I'd love to do the usual, and I'm a bit like, "Where are you doing this enough that it's the usual? Like, when is
You
this
think of
coming
that?
up? Like, why are they doing storms all the time? Does Thunder Bay need that? Like, what? Why is that the usual? They make it sound like somebody going to McDonald's on the regular. Like, yeah, getting together for Storm Sundays. Thank you, Vice Society. Like, what? How do they have a usual?
That's so incredible. Um, Also, I wanted to mention Anne's daughter, and she I don't know, it just makes me so sad. I mean, maybe there's hope. Um, like, Anne being like, "No, she can't have chocolate, she'll get fat and ugly," or whatever, but, like and then all the pigeons and squirrels are great and, like, stick all the sweets, like, really close to her, but, like,
Hmm.
she we don't know if she eats any of them, and I kinda think she didn't, and that makes me, like, really sad.
I see. I assumed
Um,
she did,
I
but that's because I want her to. It's not
I
because I
do
think
too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's definitely an uphill battle trying to become sufferable if you've got Anne for your parent. I mean, so what was the funny thing that jumped out to me is like Anne kind of initially pushes back on this whole idea of like making mass aware and stuff because my first thought was, oh my god, is her husband going to become aware? Her husband that she's so close to and is very important. Like I would fucking kill to get a POV chapter of Anne and her recently awared husband because that would be fucking hilarious. Watching her deal with that nonsense.
That'd be so good.
um,
Uh,
Also, yeah, Thea's back, which hopefully we're going to see her. Like maybe I think it said that she went with Avery. I haven't read
mhm,
14.4 and 14.5 yet, so hopefully I'm just saying a bunch of shit that is right or wrong and is funny
mhm.
at least. Um, I want to see more of Thea again. I think the story has been talking a lot about kids growing up very recently, and Thea is obviously a super fun character to play with in that regard. But I think
Mhm.
that's just me trying to come up with an excuse as to why she should be in it because she's funny.
Well, I think yeah, it's just she's fascinating, and
Yeah.
her and Avery back in whatever chapter that was, when they were having to, like, work together was
Yeah, it was
really
great.
fun. Um,
I think that was the start of arc 18. I could be wrong. But that was where we first met Fleshmongers.
yes. Um, yeah, just, like, very I don't know. She's
Yeah.
one of the practitioners we have, like, more insight into, and the, like, sheer amounts of antagonism, like, she's gotta be pulled onto team decent, so
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah. So we're still going through the list of just who's here. This is going to be a very long episode. We already covered Grayson and Anthem, and they're going to fuck probably. We've got the Grobards are here. Um,
Y
Kind of like Thea, they're another family. It feels like they haven't quite landed in the story to me. Like
hmm.
they've been around, and it feels like they're going to be important because they're constantly around and they're a big presence and they have a really cool's the wrong word, but interesting shtick. And I'm just interested to see where the Growlbards are at the end of the story.
Yeah, yeah. Thinking about it briefly, they remind me of the Kims in that they're like, "Hello,
Mm.
child, I will completely destroy your whole shit." Fun.
Yeah, no normal
But
body
yeah,
for you.
yeah.
I also noticed Eloise's family was missing. Um, which I
Oh,
guess they've
yeah.
cut that deal to get Toronto with Charles, so I guess that makes sense. But I was sad not to see Ulysses. He was fun.
Yeah, and, wasn't who was the other one
Yeah.
under Durachet? There was some other dude, I think.
Oh,
He
amine, because it's like amino acid.
Yeah.
That's how I remember his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, well, God, we'll get to Derosha in a minute because I have words to say about her. But yeah, I guess sorry. Talking about the other people who aren't here, we had Estrella who said she might come and then didn't. Classic winter shit. And the Legendaries said they would come and didn't.
I just like, there's been talk about how the legendaries are like the best practice in that like,
Yeah,
if the practice is meant to protect people from bad scary others, like they're the only practice that's like really geared toward that and they could be
yeah,
so good and they could be so useful if they just like got their heads out of their asses and also like stopped killing goblins. Like they could be yeah.
yeah. I agree.
Ugh.
They strike me as the family who's doing the closest thing to what practitioners were built to do in the
Mhm.
original incarnation of the seal. It was sort of like they sound like what the vision was for what a practitioner is, and yet somehow they're still kind of the worst. It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, like maybe that's the problem here. Maybe they're kind of salty that the Kenneteers are effectively replacing them. Like, they're the private prison system, right? In this sort of law making analogy of practitioners, maybe, and they're salty that Kennet's, you know, not going to let or trying to rehabilitate people rather than let them keep getting paid to do their prisons.
Right. I do think there is a pride tied up with, um, their choices because, they were really aligned with Musser, like, Millie was one of the lords, like,
Yeah,
I think that they are just proud and making dumb decisions because it seems like they're a family that could really benefit from the system Kennet is trying to, um, build. Um, because, yeah,
yeah.
like, I
Well,
mean,
they were
not the Goblet
underpaid.
Exterminator part, obviously, but the, like,
Yeah.
non-combat focused, really just about trying to make the world better for everyone that isn't the Bjorkmen. Um, but just
Yeah.
man.
But that, like, their thing is they just kind of lock problems up and don't deal with it. Like the ordinary family is one where they're like, don't know what this is, but we locked it down, and then
We
obviously
drew a
Charles,
circle around it.
yeah,
That's
and let
true.
Charles then let it loose. Whereas like Kennet would draw that circle and then try to fix the problem, and maybe they're just kind of salty that their shtick is kind of disappearing because of that.
Mm,
Um, but then also it's funny because they're like angry that their shtick is disappearing, while at the same time they always complain that they're undervalued.
right.
Um, so they're just grumpy people, maybe.
Ugh.
Also, yeah, Estrella, I thought it was funny that she was like because Guillermo just left the story. I saw Estrella's name and I'm like, oh, Winterfell? Are we doing Winterfell again? That was like, no, Estrella didn't come. I was like, okay, I think that's Wildbow telling us that we're done with Winterfell in this story because sort of like Estrella has no use anymore.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about the courts and because I think at one point they were flowers or something. Um, and
Yes.
like the change, and I wonder how she's reacting to the potential like breakdown of the court system, even though Winter might still kind of be
Oh yeah, good
Winter
point.
or something. Um, but then I was also thinking, like, I don't know if we've seen other examples of like, I'm a spring practitioner or whatever, and maybe that's because she's so young and her whole family was murdered or whatever that like it's been winter for about as long as she's been practicing probably slash
What
uh
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Winter's the one that doesn't really change, right? Like maybe it changes name, but I don't think it changes in ethos at least. So it's like Winter might be the only one worth specializing in because it's like, oh, well, maybe the name will change and you're no longer a Winter practitioner, but you're a something else. But it's like the Winter Fae don't change. That's like their whole thing. So it's like, yeah, it would be stupid to be a Spring Fae specialist because in 5 years that might change to being some flower bullshit or whatever. Whereas, like,
Right.
even if winter changes, it doesn't really change. So it's yeah, it kind of makes sense to me that it's the only one really worth hitching your wagon to.
Right. And I wonder if
Which
they get shifted around dramatically where like, Marisica and Guillermo would be in the same court under like, pre-winter would be in the same court under some of the configurations. Or
could
if,
be, yeah.
but
It would come down to the configuration, I guess. I mean, they were quite different, so maybe not them, but like yeah, like I mean, I think they said there were 20 courts of flowers, and obviously there's
oh
only
god.
7 courts now. So some of the courts are merging and stuff.
Yeah. The idea of flower courts, I'm like, what is that? I want to know. It's fine. Okay.
I don't know. I had this big thing written up like about 2 weeks before 23.z came out, and I never published it, but it was like it was part of this document. I'm sort of working on capturing all my thoughts on how the other verse is put together as a whole. And I had like this thing, and I was like, I figured out what the courts represent, how they fit together, like, and how each Kenneteer kind of maps to a court. And I was like really proud of it. And then
Mm.
23.z dropped it before I'd published it, and I was like, well, fuck this then, I guess. Like, I really felt that Avery vibe where she wrote in the original EM, where it was like, well, this was a waste of time. Like,
Oh.
it was so funny. Um,
Oh, the Fae.
yeah, fucking Faye. Okay, so who else? Who haven't we covered yet? I'm still going. Oh yeah, okay. Last one, and then we're finally going to move on from just listing people and talking about them. The Musses show up, some of them, and also Basil Winters and Mummy Winters.
Um, yeah, fuck the Mussers. That was just so awful that they're like, "Hey, we are more important than everyone, so you shouldn't have started without us. Also, Raquel, your mom's dead, and none of us care. Bye." Like, ugh.
Yeah, I'm starting to think I don't like the Musses as an institution. This is my new hot take as of 24.2. Muss is bad.
It's also indicative of how powerful they are slash were slash something that like,
They're
they're
still a thing?
right. The head of their family is like, like just totally fucked, and they were disgraced before that. Like all this stuff, um, but they're still a big enough deal that it's like, oh, maybe they're still up there with the Hennegers and
Mm.
Bards and all that, which is interesting.
Yeah, I guess I get the vibe that like their reach extended a lot further than just this province, whereas a
Mhm.
lot of these other ones, like they were province specific.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love Raquel's energy with these two though. Like Raquel has really embraced not really being a Mossa anymore. Like I love when they're like, "Raquel, can we talk to you?" And she's like, "No." Like I was just like, I love that for Raquel.
Mhm.
That was a great moment.
Yeah.
That is so far from where she was where we first just met her.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I was a bit sad about Raquel's mum, though. I guess to touch on that, like it's sad because it was like she was trying to do her own thing and make her own power. It's like that maybe would have let her escape some of this Mossa bullshit, or at least get power within it. Um, so that was a bit sad. But then I was also like, we see Raquel kind of take a step back after that, and I was like, yeah, I guess finding out your mum died trying to do an ambitious thing would make you less ambitious.
Yeah, it is really sad. It's sad that Raquel's like, "I don't even know if I care." Like, the whole thing was just like, "Oh, bummer." Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's pretty much everyone who's gathered. That's worth talking about. Uh, Shade very much intentionally meant at Cherry Pop.
She just
I just wanted,
okay.
I just wanted to call out though, as we start to get into the meeting, we do get this thing as the Kenneteers gear up to start. They're each sitting in front of three tall, narrow windows, and these windows are fucking color coordinated. And it's not really spelt out. Like Wildbow kind of makes you work for it. It's very fun. It's like explaining why they're different, and then it's not really till the end of those explanations you realize one's orange, one's red, and one's purple. And I was just like, this fucking story, like that's so ridiculous and perfect, and I love it. And yeah, hilarious.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, did the windows kind of change after they decided, or did they just not
Yeah.
notice, or did they choose them intentionally? Like, Avery mentions choosing her chair because it looked, like, normal/comfortable, slash comfortable. And it's just so fun. It's fun that, like, Verona scrubbed out a section to see out through the window, and it made it, like, better with the vibes. Um,
Yeah.
like
So while both saying there's more to it than the color combination, so now I'm gonna have to go reread it because I missed whatever else he was dropping in there. Um, yeah, but like, sorry, do you assume that Soot Slave
Oh!
set up these windows?
Well, it's her castle, so yes. Um, but yes,
Oh, sorry, the
Azizer did it points
sun.
out that sun, stars, and moon, it's, like tarot.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so
Which
Verona is the moon, Avery, I'm assuming, is the sun, and Lucy is the stars?
yeah, yeah. Sorry, there's also some fun history behind the conversation of the Kenneteers mapping to tarot that I don't know.
Oh, Lucy's the sun,
Um,
and Avery's the stars. Just kidding.
yeah. No, that's fun. So yeah, because that's like Walbo has argued that those are the three tarot cards that they sort of mapped to before. Um,
Mhm.
so that's fun. Cool. But yeah, it is just that thing where like, did Soot Sleeves just set this up and those three naturally went there because they're like, oh well, that's my one, or like, did they request it? Like, it's so funny to me the practical side of like, how did these hilarious personal windows get instituted in in this thing? Like, I just find that hilarious. Somebody did this.
And it would make sense if they did kind of ask for it just in terms of, like, presentation and the practice and
Oh yeah,
dramaticism and all of that. Like, it would totally make sense, but it's also really great.
yeah. I mean, well, that's what's fun about the other verse, right? Is it's like you're incentivized to be dramatic and pull dumb shit like this because the spirits presumably ate this shit up.
Mhm.
Speaking of like unnecessary drama, Lucy opens the meeting by putting a spell card on the table, which makes her like tapping her cup with her spoon ring even louder. And like, I think even Anne is just like, this is unnecessary. And I was like, Anne, shut your nerd mouth. This is hilarious. Like, I'm all for it.
But also as someone who's, like, tried to get large groups of people's attention,
Yeah.
um, like, good, yes, effective, you don't hurt your voice, you don't need to be like a, "If you can hear my voice, clap once," like, so good.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. Um, but yeah, okay, so let's get into the actual pitch. The Kennetiers are here and they're pitching a thing, which is that they actually want to build a good system because they think about the future. So they go back through the past, recap on why people like Alexander were shit, and they want to give the little guy a voice as they're building something. Yeah, going towards the future. They want to change the seal to be more flexible, add conventions before forswearing, actually give aware like recognition,
Mhm.
blah blah blah. Anyway, yeah, like they've got a whole pitch. We're kind of familiar with it, but it is nice to get it sort of spelt out like this.
Yeah, I feel like the more Wellboat allows the characters to spell things out, like, the better. I mean, yeah, it doesn't ever feel repetitive, it just feels like
No,
I'm understanding it more,
yeah,
which is
100%.
impressive.
Yeah, it's sort of like because it does kind of feel like what happened here is a lot of the stuff that has been somewhere between text and subtext in the story is now just kind of getting spelt out and recapped and like used to justify their plan, which makes it feel less like it's just an info dump and more like it's a reminder of something that you should remember and maybe you don't, and it helps
Right,
you like put all those pieces together, like you said, like you sort of oh, I understand it better now because I see how that chunk of the story maps to what is happening now.
right.
I also wanted to call out this funny little moment where Lucy dunks on some of the people by pointing out like the rules of hospitality, and Avery thinks to herself, "Oh yeah, Mussa's lawyer kind of beat us on that front during that meeting with Mussa where we killed him." Um, and so like Lucy had apparently been reading up on this stuff, and I just like that's such a funny perfect Lucy moment that like Lucy got by a rule, and so of course she's just gone and studied it up, and like she's not like Lucy does not get got twice.
Yeah, like
It was like such a like this is Lucy's flavor of nerd is she's like absolutely not. I will learn and understand these rules now because I will turn the system to my favor, and I love that.
yeah, definitely.
Um, but yeah, I guess I also want to dive in. I thought it was really fun that we get this recap of Alexander and then Bristow and then Massa. Um, and like you know, we already talked a bit about how it gives this like capstone feeling to the meeting because it kind of recaps the entire story effectively. Like those are the enemies the major enemies they fought in the practitioner establishment. And they're textually tying it to this end game plan that they've concocted. Uh, but I also just kind of loved getting, yeah, a little summary of what Alexander, Bristow, and Mussa meant to the Kennetiers. Like, it is really fun, I guess, seeing how they fit in the story, but also like seeing how the Kennetiers think of that is also kind of interesting. It's like an extra
Mhm.
layer to it of like, yeah, like Verona has that moment where she's like, look, I was involved in Bristow's death, but like that was on him. And like, I guess getting little insights into that also helps it make it feel less info dumpy.
Right. Um, I mean, it's fun always whenever they are talking and kind of, like, interspersing, amongst the 3 of them and how well it works, like,
Mm,
um, Lucy talks about Alexander because that's the thing that really haunts her, and then Verona talks about Bristow because that's the thing that really haunts her, and then Avery's gotta talk about someone, but
yeah,
also, like, Musser's just such an opposite of Avery and how she approaches the world,
yeah.
um, that it also fits even if she wasn't, like, the one that did the blow or whatever, um,
I mean, she's the
regarding
one who made the hole in Marisica that Massa got put into, like when Marcy
that's true.
vored him. So
That's a good
if you
point.
really if you really want to stretch it, yeah, yeah, no, I agree. There was a funny bit of it's like, yeah, Lucy's paired with Alexander, makes sense. Verona is paired with Bristow, makes sense. Avery is the third wheel, so she just gets Massa because he's left, makes sense. Um, yeah, no, I agree. I do think it's like Massa is the opposite of everything Avery stood for. Because the more power she gets, the more of a just I don't know, himbo she becomes, and less ambitious she becomes, and that's the opposite of everything Masa was about.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, you've mentioned that, like, with the aware, it's it's great that, um, they break down the language because the aware are here, so they need to explain kind of like, what is forswearing? Oh, it's torture that the universe, like,
Yeah,
wants to prolong, like, they're able to do these things, and, um some of the practitioners are like, like, we don't wanna confront the fact that, like, this is what this thing is that we totally benefit from." And they're like, "Oh, we're just we need to explain it so that other people in the room understand."
yeah,
Which is a fun strategy. In talking about the 3 headmasters, like, a lot of the people in the room were friends with the 3 of them, and benefited from like, the most powerful people in the room
yeah,
really benefited from, um, those 3 men, and so, like, continuously saying, especially with Alexander and Bristow, like, they had a lot of really cool, good qualities, and, like, there were a lot of things about them that, like, we don't wanna throw in the trash, but
yeah,
also, like, y'all gotta admit that they sucked, um, in a lot of
yeah,
specific ways, and, like, trying to balance out this pitch in this room to, like, all of these different people, um, is difficult, and we've seen them do this well, but the aware are a fun new aspect in terms of being able to use different words, not just in a, like, "Haha, semantics, I have the upper hand," but, like, no, like, they don't know what that word means, so I'm just gonna explain it differently.
yeah, and you can't then, hide from what it is. Like, forswearing as a word doesn't carry all the weight of being punished for eternity. You're not allowed to die because the universe is having too much fun torturing you. Like,
Mhm,
hits harder to hear than just, "Oh, he was forsworn." Um, and so, like, the Kenneteers are kind of bringing up that some of this language is just about shielding the nuance rather than adding to it.
mhm,
Uh, but yeah, I love the way, like we touched on this, but Aware have been in this story the whole time, have always been a gap in the seal, and it's long been a thing that they were like leaks in the system, and it's like, somehow it's taken till now for me to really appreciate how long it's been. It's like the Kennedys are now using that, and like even better than Charles and Marcy were trying to do with Forsworn. It's like they're like, oh, the Aware are because of a problem with the seal. Let's rework the seal and include them, so everything fits together better. It's like
mm.
it's like turning the problem into part of the solution. I love it so much. And then they're also talking a lot about, oh, we've got all the little guys, like all these little markets, and they're not getting taken seriously. So we're going to bring all them in because there's that power in the common folk and diversity and all that. And they demonstrate that using Cherry Pop of all people, which is hilarious because if you're going to talk about little shit people being able to be important anyway, Cherry Pop is the epitome of that vibe.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's so good.
And I like how they are tying it back to, in Arc 14, I remember there was a lot of concern about people leaving Kennet, um, and kind of throwing it back in these practitioners' faces of, like, a lot of you left, like, a lot of you left the region, um,
Yeah,
but, like, they didn't, and, like, that makes them like, they have more claim or coup, but also just, like, I don't know, in a way, like, makes them braver.
mm,
And a lot of it is probably, like, they didn't have the resources to leave, and maybe they thought, they wouldn't be noticed and other places wouldn't necessarily be better for them, but it's cool thinking of, like, yeah, like, not only do they outnumber you, but also, like, in some ways, like, they are stronger than you, not just because
yeah.
of their numbers, and they're great.
Yeah, 100%. And, that comes into, like, something that comes up later is when Mr. Knox is the first person to sort of be like, "I'm on board." Miss Grobard is like, "What did they offer you?" And he, like, completely no use her, and he's like, "What the fuck are you guys offering me? Because as far as I'm concerned, everyone else, as soon as they failed, just fucking bailed. These kids are
Right.
here, like, they're still trying. They're gonna try and fix this region. Like, that's worth it to me." And it's funny because in a way that's not a completely different argument to what he might have made when he was on Team Mussa in Arc 18. Like, I remember
Mhm.
when all the practitioners were stranded in Canada in Arc 18, a lot of them were like, "You ruined everything," went, "Meh, meh, 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 meh," and, Grayson's still like that.
Mhm.
And, like, really, there's not much difference between how Mr. Knox is acting here and how those how those practitioners were acting in Arc 18 against the Kenneteers, where it was like, they were kind of in it for selfish reasons, and that's sort of what Mr. Knox is here. It's just the Kennetiers, their system encourages good selfishness rather than like selfishness through being part of a community rather than part of this competitive hierarchy.
Right.
Like that's really the only difference. It's like I think that's why I loved Mr. Knox in this scene so much, because it's like he is being the same as a Massa follower was in Arc 17. It's just he's proving why Kennet's system is better because they're incentivizing him to be like that as a member of a good community. And like that's really the only difference between their offers is Kennet's like, we're gonna do the same thing but good.
Right. And yeah, that gives me hope in terms of if there are enough Kenneteers, if there are enough like Anthem I think of as a person who isn't is doing it because he thinks it's the right thing, not necessarily because he's personally benefiting from it. Like
Yeah,
if there are enough people like that who are doing it, you know, possibly slightly against interest or at least, um, not being incredibly benefited, it'll help bolster the
yeah,
whole system. Because like, it makes sense to some extent why Grayson is still fighting it and being a shit because, like, he
yeah,
really benefited from the system where, um, you know, people are fighting all the time and whatever. But, like, so did Anthem. So, I don't know.
yeah. But Anthem was, I mean, like he was different because he was just doing it because he was an idiot who refused to go to therapy and he was trying to do shit for his daughters. Like, um, he wasn't that same kind of institution. Whereas, yeah, like the Hennigers and the Mossers remind me of the idea about like taxing billionaires more. It's like they still probably would have been fine, but it's like they get a smaller
Right.
piece of the pie, and that's just antithetical to their whole ethos,
Yeah.
which is like to get more power to have a bigger chunk of the pie. Um, Whereas, like yeah, talking about people like Mister Knox, it's a bit, and an Anthem, it's a bit like, yeah, okay, maybe they're going to just be doing the right thing at the moment because it selfishly they're incentivized to do that now. But I guess the hope would kind of be that after a lot of years of that being their pattern, maybe, and as they build those ties to the community, maybe they would just actually be good people and like,
Hmm.
be like Avery. Like, it's sort of like after a decade of being incentivized to be in the community and do good things, hopefully that just sort of becomes who they are, or at the very least, a generation or two becomes who their kids are.
Mm.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to pull out this quote that kinda, like, broke my heart, and also, I don't have the imagination to come up with an answer, but, um, Verona says something, particularly insightful or clever, and Avery talks about the different gifts that they had gotten and how, like, from Miss, and how she's now, like, finder extraordinaire, and Lucy got the weapon ring and is, like, a crazy duelist chick, and
Mm.
Verona had been given that quill that let her manipulate words, but Brett broke it. Um, and Avery wondered what Verona could have or would have become if she'd kept with that. And like, I find this devastating. Um, because it feels like, yeah, Miss was so right about the other two, and maybe with Lucy it kind of fucked her over, but also I believe that Lucy doesn't have to be like a
Yeah.
child soldier forever or whatever. Um, and like, you know, would this have played into some of Verona's amorality or just, like, what could she have done with this? And yeah, what even is the practice of wordsmith? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think why the pen vibes with me is because I still think Verona was always probably going to drift towards like this sorceress stuff or some variation. Like she was never going to be a specialist, I don't think.
Mm,
And I think the pen actually kind of suits that because it's flexible. Like words are an important part of most practices. Word play is an important part of most practices. Like being able to do that. So like I think that quill pen sounds like the perfect tool for a sorceress or someone like Verona
mm,
because it's suitable in a variety of situations. Like honestly, that quill's the sort of thing I could have seen her taking as an implement. Um,
mm,
because it's so versatile, and I think she would want something that is like a wand but not a wand. Um, and I think the quill would have nailed that. So, like, yeah, I guess it just kind of sucks because it was an example of something that kind of encapsulated her flexibility and cleverness and ability to twist the system by moving those words around. And Brett broke it, and it's taken her a long time to put the pieces back together.
Right.
Um,
Oh, yeah, I'm easily impressed is reminding me one of the times she used it was, to fuck over Bristow with the
good
brownies,
times.
um,
Yeah, that's right.
which might be why I had some misgivings around the idea of her using it, but she could have made choices. I don't
Yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah. But yeah, okay. So basically, the Kennedys make their pitch, and Florin then leads us around the room to figure out who's in and who's out. Uh, then once all the nerds leave, the tentative yes votes kind of stick around, and we start to figure out how to turn those tentative yeses into definites.
Yeah, so the it seemed like the people who were definitely out were the Mussers and Grayson, and then Grabard straight up is like, "No," but doesn't leave. Um,
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, but I'm listening." It's kind of like, okay.
right, I was like, "Is that a maybe? Like, what does that mean?" You said I don't okay. Um, but,
Again,
you know
the Graubarts have to. I mean, I guess especially like I guess the Graubarts' whole thing with their dolls is it's like they really straddle that line of what it means to be a practitioner versus an other. So as the Kennetys maybe fuck with those definitions of the seal, I guess that's important to the Graubarts.
Mhm. Um, but yeah, the rest of them there's a lot of yeses, but the most notable person kind of felt like Florin, and he's not even really in the region at the moment in terms of, like, power, um,
Well, he
but
says he wants to come back, doesn't he? He sort of is like, yeah, I'll come hang out, see how this goes, which is exciting.
yeah, I think so.
Um, I kind of like the vibe you almost get from the Mosses and the Hennigers here too is that they're effectively just pulling out of the region. Like maybe I'm wrong in that, but I kind of get the vibe that this is the Hennigers and the Mosses just saying no to Ontario, um, which I hope is the case because them not being here kind of defuels Charles as far as I'm concerned. Like
Mhm,
they've that's less violence. So
mhm.
I kind of hope that the Mosses and the Hennigers are just like we're out.
Yeah, um, I agree, I think I mean, part of me is like, I want these people to like, I want the Kenneteers to figure out how to change and work with people that are even like this, but also
Hmm.
there comes a point where, like,
Yeah, one step at a
you
time.
bind Edith, you know? Like, there comes to be a point where you,
Right, yeah.
can't work with people as they are. And they do have a lot of these other fun shitheads to work with, so
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. We can get to fixing the Mosses and the Hennigers later. Um, also, yeah, the Winters show up late, um, and they're just so
which was a
delightfully
move.
shitty. They're like, "Oh, yeah, and, we can give you answers on how to fuck over the Negatiers, but it'll require you giving us back the Turtle Queen." Um, like, yeah, just I kind of loved their shitty energy. It was more fun. Like, whereas Grayson, I wanted Lucy to stab him, um, again. Whereas with the Winters, I was like, oh, you're such fun assholes. Like, you're so behind the times.
Yeah, and I think also that they're a little bit like, they're desperate is, like,
Oh
the
yeah,
vibe, especially, like, they lost the Turtle Queen, and she's, you know, an incredibly
she's
powerful
a tank.
other.
Yeah,
And they were already, you know, from Basil's interlude, we see that he's just, like, slimy and awful, and, like, you know, screwing over Ray and all this shit, and so them showing up and being like, they don't feel as threatening. Like, it's like Deb and Anne kind of, it's like, "Oh my god,"
yeah.
and not like, "Oh, this is a huge problem."
You're right. Debonair is a much better comparison. Um, I re- I really liked the way Kennet was like, "Oh, we've kind of bound the Turtle Queen to the Kennet Council as well," and they're all like, "Yeah, it won't last, blah blah." And it's like, I mean, I hadn't thought about the way you could consider like things like the Kennet Council as a kind of soft binding. Like this is the Kennet Council is kind of an existing version of what the Kennetys are talking about starting up here. It's like a binding. It's less strict though, but it's like those sorts of agreements to be on that council. It's like Durachet used to say, everything's a kind of binding, and they've gotten the Turtle
Mm.
Queen to agree to certain rules, which are keeping her contained and incentivizing her to not be a piece of shit. And it's like, yeah, like again, one of those moments where I was like, oh wow, yeah, this has been Kennet's ethos the whole story. It's just now we're expanding and clarifying.
Right. Um, yeah, being agreed to be restrained in a way that allows you to, like, work with other people. Because even, yeah, at the very beginning of the story, like, John would, um, what's the word? Uh, walk around, patrol the perimeter
Yeah.
and stuff. Like, everyone, they had to give up some power to the Kenneteers. Like, it wasn't like, I'm doing literally everything I want to do at every exact moment, but you give things up to, like, be in society. And so
Yeah.
the Turtle Queen being able to live a happy, although she probably can't feel that emotion, like, fulfilling life while being less completely free. Um, I don't know, it's great.
Well, and I think we've seen in this story the Turtle Queen growing. Like the thing about Kennet's soft binding is it incentivizes you to actually like grow and like the winters keep being like, oh, she's just a virus, like blah blah blah. And I was like, no, I think the whole point is that she's becoming more than that, and like
Right,
she's probably got a boyfriend now. Like like that's not true anymore.
right.
Um, but and that yeah, this is the whole thing that Kennet is trying to do with the Aware as well. Like it's I just the concept of something like the Kennet Council actually being a binding, but in a good way. I just kind of love that as a way of thinking about this stuff. It takes that old lesson Durusha used to say about how even a conversation is a type of binding and kind of turns it into something you can use as as more than just like an edgy comment on conversations.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess speaking of actually, things get interrupted when Ray and Derosha show up, and they're technically not really here to help, but Ray does have a bit of a D&M with the Kenneteers and ends up offering them some info.
Ray
So
has a
he does.
what?
He does have. I always forget this is an Australian thing. D&M's deep and meaningful. It's just like a intense conversation.
Oh, cool.
Sorry, I always forget that's an Australianism. Yeah, so yeah, Ray goes out and has a convo with the Kenneteers. And I just want to start this section by pointing out what is Marie Durachet doing here exactly? She does nothing. All she does is flirt with Soot Sleeves as they're leaving, which is a ship that I'm fully on board with, by the
Mhm.
way. But
Mhm.
um, like she contributes nothing here.
And yeah, yeah. It's nice to see her, but also, yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I just like because Ray has this moment where he's like, "Sorry, this isn't like where you get Marie to kill Musa for you. Like, I can't be swayed or whatever." And I was like, "Okay, well, can we stop talking to him and go try it on her again? Because it worked last time. Like,
Maybe she'll
let's
do
try and get her on side."
something. Uh, yeah.
Like, yeah,
Um,
Derosha skirts around that escape to the story practitioner tier. Like, she's really riding the line on it.
yeah. Although she feels like someone who doesn't need to escape the story. Like,
No,
the way
yeah,
people
she's just
talk
doing
about
her
her,
thing.
she's just at such a crazy power level. I'm like, why are you here? Like, why are you in this? What are you doing?
This is just where all her friends were, and I guess Ray's the only one left, so she's probably just following him around because I don't think she makes friends easily.
That's true.
Wobber's just commented that Derosha is what people in stories escape from. I like that.
Oh, she's the best. Um, yeah, but I mean, like, even Ray shows up and it puts into perspective, like, how powerful he is. Because
Yeah.
he's like, okay, class, like, break time. Like, like, no one else had this energy. We've seen lots of people show up late, and he's just sort of like, okay, like, this is cute. We're gonna take a break and talk to me now. Um, and yeah, just like the power of the international community, um, is interesting. Um, but also he's so fucking dramatic. Like, I'm starting to think I'm an optimist because, like, everything's always worse than I think it'll be, and you're like, "Oh my god, like, edgelord, please." And, like, sometimes I think I'm like an incarnation, like, completely tied to blah, 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 blah. And, like, yeah, I guess, but also, please, I don't know, like, just stop. Just stop.
It's such a tech guy way of talking, though. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like that sounds like the way people I know in the Bay Area talk about stuff. So, I agree with you, but like, it's incredibly realistic. I think.
I just yeah. I mean, him being like I appreciate some of the stuff he does in this chapter, um, in terms of, trying to put out a lifeline for some of the Negateers and
Mm.
various things, and it is good to see him again in a fun way. Um, but it's just the like, "Hi, I'm here and I can't do anything" is such like alabaster dough energy or something, like very like, "I'm super powerful, but my power like constrains me to the point where I can't use it to do anything other
Yeah.
than support the system."
Well, I think that's why it's really interesting that he's shown up right now because we just like Charles just got that big global power boost
Mhm.
and seemingly isn't having to deal Charles I think has had some limitations placed on him, like he needs to secure the area or whatnot, but he's also being allowed to cook whatever the fuck he's cooking, which we'll get into that when it comes up later. But like, yeah, like Ray comes in as this like ambassador for the powers that be, and is sort of like, yeah, now that I'm with them, my hands are tied. But also, I'm sitting there, and it's like, well, that seems like a little bit of a you problem because Charles is doing fine without it. And then also
Mm.
Ray is like being his old stable system self where he's sort of like, oh yeah, we'll just like ward Charles in and then the problem will be solved. And like Lucy sort of has to be like, uh the fuck are you talking about? That's clearly a terrible plan. But that is just kind of what London and shit are pushing. Is like he's like, yeah, we'll ward him in and it'll be fine. Charles, like just let Charles do his own thing, and that works out for everyone.
Right, like, so insane.
Like, literally, his whole thing is going from being forsworn to a judge. Like you should not let this guy just sit somewhere quiet and cook. Kennet is the living example of this.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, it was funny because at first, like Ray does kind of pick their side, where he's a bit like, I can't actively work against Charles, but if we don't talk about Charles and we talk about the Lords or the Negateers, then I can help you.
Right.
Um, and at first I was like, oh, is this just because Zed's on their side and Zed's his apprentice, so he wants to protect him? But then it's like I really love all these moments where it's like he finds out Charles is using kids, and you kind of get the vibe that that's what crosses the line where Ray's like, okay, I'm gonna and he offers this out for the Negateers, and that's really good. Like that feels like something he can do, and because Ray's thing has always kind of been like he's kind of incompetent at working with people, but the one consistent thing about him has been he's always wanted what's best for kids. Like
Uh-huh.
obviously there's the story with his son, and like in his interlude in Arc 13, he had that conversation with Macaulay where he was like really shit at handling Macaulay, but wanted what was best for her and had ideas around that. It's like I think the one thing about Ray is he's shit at it, but he wants what's best for kids, and he sees Charles as abusing kids, and he's like, okay, I'll give them an out. And he concocts this reason that technically they're Blue Heron students, so he's obligated to, but that's clearly bullshit.
Oh,
He
yeah.
just wants to help.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I mean, it is kind of that aspect of Ray that makes me love him. Um,
Yeah.
like and, like, the whole, like, complete inability to, like, be social in a way that, like, just works is really fun. And yeah, we're reminded here of how much of that is tied up with his son and how he has not dealt with that trauma even a little bit, and how it's like completely and
Mm,
totally it almost seems like front of mind for him at all times. Like Lucy
yeah.
says something about um I think how Donnie like killed his dad or whatever, and he's like, "You're just saying that because you know my history," and it's like, "Whoa, like
Yeah. No,
let's take a
it's
step
Avery.
back." Like,
Sorry, I remember it's Avery who says that because he's like, "Oh, are you
mm.
saying that?" And Avery's like, "I was not thinking about that." And it was just like the 1 millionth time in this story that somebody's been like, "Oh, is Avery scheming?" And it's like, no, Avery's too much of a himbo to scheme. She's just saying things that pop into her head at any time. Like she's a runner who doesn't think more than one step ahead. Of course, she's not scheming. She just got lucky.
Yeah. Um, but God. And then he when he agrees or when he just decides, yeah, I'm gonna try to help the St. Victor's kids or whatever, like he starts talking to their parents and he says
Mm,
that bit where it's,
great speech.
like you're gonna look back on this and you're gonna think like through this 1,000 times and you're gonna think of all the things you wish you'd said and you're gonna like beat yourself up over it, and like what you need to do is currently beat yourself up over it and figure out all that shit now because you don't have it, like this is your last
Yeah.
chance. And it's like, holy shit. Like it's so good, and also just like because you know like this is his life, and it's just like
Yeah.
ugh.
Yeah, it lands so hard because it's just yeah, like this has been his trauma that has defined his entire existence, and it's that sort of thing where I was kind of like, oh, okay, I think this might be a series wrap on Ray. Like we
Mhm.
may hear from him again as he picks up St. Victor's kids or something, but like this felt like a great exit from Ray for the story where he gets to kind of come in, show us that, he's not better, but he's working on it, and he gets a chance to tell these other parents, don't fuck up like I did. It's sort of this great full circle feeling for Ray as a character.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because like none of these parents know what's up with this dude, or like
Yeah,
if he has children or anything, but it's just very like, oh god, like
yeah.
uh,
But yeah, so yeah, this is sort of around the point. The meeting kind of fully breaks up. Avery says goodbye to her parents. Raquel kind of does the same thing in her own way, and then Sylvia finally has a moment with Verona. But before we get to any of that, sorry, the first thing I want to call out, we get some clues that the Alair Forsworn, which we do need a better name for them, but what are they cooking? Like it was like, oh, we were going to use Marisica's ability to create with a capital C, but now we're doing it with glamour, and it's just like what? And Verona starts tinfoiling about what they're building, but it's so like what? This is fun. I knew Charles had something else that he was planning, and I'm so excited to see what it is.
yeah, it was fun thinking about um like thinking about wishes in the sense of, or like maybe you could kind of do something through glamour, because like I think we know that glamour can become real eventually or something. Winter glamour is probably better at that, but like
Yeah.
yeah, building stuff up enough can actually change things. And so yeah, what it seems like we've seen them throw some buildings together, but is that the thing or what? I don't know. This is incoherent.
Yeah, well, I mean, because Verona kind of nixes the only two sensible ideas pretty much off the bat, which gives you that like story rule vibe of, well, it can't be the big
It
ritual incarnate or
can't
the
be
wish
these.
because,
Yeah.
and like I was thinking because like Verona was coming at it very much from like Charles doing similar shit to what he's done or trying to change things, and I just keep my like the understanding of Charles that I have is kind of like no, like he's entering phase two of his plan. Like the Kennetys are talking a lot about their own version of the seal, and they're trying to build their seal 2.0 that's softer and all that. And I'm part of me thinking I would have thought Charles is at that point as well. Like
Hmm.
Charles has his issues with the seal, and he has a very different strategy for how to fix it to the Kennetiers, but like the idea that London wants to just lock him in here for 5 years, it's like, well, that feels like the perfect opportunity to bake something really big that like overpowers the seal in some aspects, like undoes the concept of forswearing or like fuck knows, right? But like that would have been my guess as to what he was trying to do. Is like he's baking something that will replace the seal, which might interact in a
Hmm.
fun way with what the Kennetiers are doing.
Yeah.
That's the closest I've got to a theory.
I was gonna say that's kind of fun in that I don't know why, but every time I think about the Seal of Solomon, I think about like a huge open like grasslands or desert or prairie or something meadow, and this big like concrete circle with like a big diagram etched into it, and like a dude like like a Middle Eastern dude like standing in the center of it with the sun shining. And like I know it's probably not like I just think of like a literal big seal. And so thinking of the Alairs like building or messing with, I'm thinking of them, yeah, like fucking with a big concrete circle. Um
I
Now I
mean,
want to
kind
know
of,
how
because
he did it.
there is a seal of Solomon you can draw, so maybe that's like part of this glamour stuff is like altering. Yeah, anyway, I don't know. There's like a lot there, but that's I just feel like Charles is still rocking the plan or like an altered version of the plan. But I reckon he's trying to twist the seal in his own way, and we're going to have to see these two plans compete on that front.
Yay.
So that should be fun.
Mhm.
Um, oh, what else? Oh yeah, you had the thing here about Raquel going and talking nerd shit with Sheridan.
Yeah, becoming the 6th Kelly child.
Yeah, just what they needed. Another one.
It's a lovely, like, it reminds me a little bit of Macaulay staying with Verona next chapter, but just like, you know, people who have these like connections with each other, just trying to like support each other, in a way that also supports them. Like, Raquel probably needs to talk to Sheridan about like dumb bullshit for a little bit, and I think it could benefit Sheridan as well. And I mean, like, another practitioner to support
Yeah.
making sure the Kellys are safe, and it's just like it's really lovely. Um
Yeah, it's a good little moment.
yeah. Although I think that like like Avery's mom is still around next chapter, and like maybe Raquel and Fernanda? Um
Yeah.
so I'm not sure what exactly was up with that, but
Maybe she went to talk to Sheridan, but they actually disagree on a ship in that show that they watch, so then they're not
she
friends
came
anymore.
back.
She's like, "Oh, fuck this. Fuck, I can't handle this." She thinks Brad and Angelina belong together. Like, I can't do this.
I'm done.
Um, but yeah, should we talk about the Sylvia in the room, or
Yes.
not? Because she is out of here. Um, what? Because I learned after reading the chapter yesterday that apparently this was a hot topic of debate.
It
Um,
was.
and I'm curious where you and everyone else stands, because I definitely have an opinion on what Sylvia did here.
Um I think so the first time I read it, the line of like "I'm leaving" was like scary and devastating and like broke my soul. But then it was like, oh, she's going to go talk to Xavier and she's going to learn, and like she's coming back to Kennet and she's going to like figure some shit out and it's going to be great. And so I was pretty much like, yeah, this feels like a good thing that happened. And then rereading it and going slower, I was like, oh, she phrases things really horribly. Like, oh, I have work to do. Like, I I don't know if it was just, she just learns that her friend is a practitioner because Ray mentions it. And yeah, so like I have work to do. Like I was kind of like, oh, cool, she's gonna learn what's up and she's gonna be a better mom and like stuff. But reading it slower for some reason, I was like, oh my god, like that's not the way you should say that. And like she says, I want you to come to me, and it's like, okay, bitch, like back up and calm down. Like it was like kind of funny rereading it and being like, oh, this is phrased so poorly. But then I mean she immediately is like in Kennet, but also if you're in Kennet, just go to her fucking house. Anyway, I think that Verona doesn't
Yeah,
have the
so
bandwidth.
you have a place to stay in Kennet. Like, it's like when she's like, "I'll figure out a place to stay in Kennet." Part of me is like, I mean, your daughter has a house with many rooms. But anyway,
Right.
I suppose you don't want to just crash at your daughter's place without asking.
Right. It's their weird thing about like boundaries and trying not to like impose on each other and stepping on eggshells that leads to them not communicating super well. Um Ultimately I feel like this is really good because Verona can't like Sylvia needs to get her head around this. She has a lot to learn. She has a lot of dumb questions to ask, and she has a lot of like repetitive questions to ask. And like
Mm,
Verona cannot be that person right now. And honestly, no
yeah.
one here can be that person right now. We see her get like cut off from talking to people several times before this conversation. And so, yeah, I think
Yeah.
this is really good and that she's heading in a good direction, but the way she phrased it sucked.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely an element to this of where, like, part of me is like, well, by Sylvia standards, this is great. Like, she set the bar incredibly low in the past, even the recent past. Um, yeah, I think that the big thing that kind of stands out to me with it, like, sort of based on what you were saying, I feel like, well, a lot of what Pale has been doing has been dissecting what being a parent means, and Verona has been a key part of how the story is doing that, because she has a lot of history with the concept of parenting, and she has very specific needs from parents that, like, like she needs certain parts of parenting and not others. Like she doesn't really want
Mhm.
a parent to tell her what she can and can't do. Like she wants to live in her house and like have sex and whatever. Like she's not looking for a parent to impose boundaries, but she is looking
Right.
for like that sort of emotional support from a mum.
Right.
And that's what she was like, that was what she was looking for when she kind of dragged Sylvia into the domain and awarified her, was she was like, I need an emotional rock right now. But then she kind of learned that Mal and Anselm were dead very shortly after that. And I feel like since that moment where Verona learned that Kennet below was getting dissected and she lost her friends, it like it shifted kind of what she needed from her mum in that moment. Like I don't think like she's it's like it's almost since then she's not wanted Sylvia around right now. Like I think she did want Sylvia around, and then she found out Mal and Anson were dead, and it was kind of like now she was like, I don't have time to do this with you. I'm too mad, and I've got other shit. Like we need to fuck over Charles. So it's almost like
Right.
Sylvia's finally caught up to the fact that yeah, Verona doesn't want her here right now. She just needs to know that she will be there, and I feel like that's exactly what Sylvia gives her. Sylvia is like, I'm going to go, I'm going to study up, and then I'm coming back to Kennet. And it's like that's the back to Kennet part was the really important thing because that's what Verona has been trying to nail into this woman for over an arc now. Is like I need you in Kennet, and Sylvia kind of gives her that, and also gives her the space she needs right now. And so I was kind of like I got the vibe that Sylvia did the perfect thing in this moment, and it's maybe not ideal parenting overall, but that's like in the past, and kind of I think what she did here, considering where she was, is like as good as she could do here, if that makes sense.
Right, and I
Like,
think that, like, considering where they are is a huge part of it because, like,
yeah,
if she had made different choices and been better, she could have been where, like, Connor is or whatever, and, like, Avery's parents should not be running around the battlefield or whatever, but, like, it's interesting thinking of yeah, like, innocent parents can't help, like, at all, really. Awarants are really good, like, emotional support,
yeah,
um, but then, like, there's something to be said, I suppose, for practitioner families in that, like, if Sylvia was a sorceress, cool shit, whatever, like, she could be there physically with her daughter, like, helping, and it'd be a lot different, but yeah, just sort of thinking, Sylvia wouldn't need to go away, uh, if she had her mind wrapped around the whole magic is real thing, you know, before the next chapter, maybe she does because she doesn't need to be in a war zone or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, the her becoming aware in the context of all some of my closest friends are dead and I'm learning that right now was not
mm,
ideal for anything.
either of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that's where I think it was that part that took me a while to sort of reconcile what had happened with Verona and Sylvia. Is like because Verona dragged Sylvia in, and there was this energy of like, I need you here right now to be my mom. And then it kind of seemed like Verona didn't want that, and I was confused as to what Sylvia was meant to do, and Sylvia probably fucking was as well.
Mhm.
And it took me a while, I think, to sort of process like, oh, like Verona changed, I think, when she learned her friends were dead, and it was like, okay, she doesn't need to, yeah, with that stuff with her mum. And so I think Sylvia's kind of finally clocked onto that and made what I think is the best decision in this scenario she could have,
Right.
which is assure Verona she will be there, but yeah,
The other problem is yeah, Sylvia can't really be her mom right now because she's so behind. Like it reminds me of Kelsey
yeah,
when Kelsey was, like, freaking the fuck out, until the point where she's, like, giving the Musser women, like, business advice or whatever, like, that moment where they're in that, cabin on the Musser or Witt's property or wherever the crap they were, like, was the
mm.
moment where it was like, "Okay, like,
Yeah,
Kelsey's in her element again, like, Kelsey has enough grasp of whatever's happening that she can now, like, mom and be herself again, and
yeah,
Sylvia's not yeah, she just can't. So,
that,
like, even without Mal and Anselm dying, like, we're in crisis mode and I have to combat Charles and all this shit is happening right now, like, Lucy's maybe gonna die because the family man's gonna kill her or whatever, like, that's not the best she can't
mm.
mom
Yeah, and
them. Bleh.
and this is a recurring beat we've kind of seen where the you can see the parents in the Kennetiers like Sylvia's basically saying, "Hey, I need to sort of take a step back, process this, learn it, and then I can come back and do the job." And that's fucking Verona 101. Like we saw Verona do that about Malina and Selm a couple of chapters ago. Like that is
Mhm.
also it's that sort of thing where it would be a little unfair to not give Sylvia some of that slack because it's like that's Verona does it and she got that from her mum probably.
Mhm.
So it's like yeah, like I think and you know I think Sylvia doesn't quite make that call until she has clicked onto the fact that Verona needs mummisms from her that don't involve being here right now. She's actually in the way. I think that's the vibe Verona's been giving her quite heavily and she sort of finally picks up on it. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I think, yeah. So yeah, I'm very pro Sylvia. I'm like, Wabo shared a poll that he did on his like Parahuman server on like how people ranked Sylvia out of 10, and it looks like the average is around 6,
Hmm.
which is interesting. I would have given it. I mean, I guess it depends on your interpretation of the question, but how would you rate Sylvia in this chapter as the question? I would have given her a 9 or a 10, I reckon. I think she nails it.
Yeah, I think it's a big, like, in the context of where she is, like,
Yeah.
she can't go back and change the
It's this
past or whatever.
chapter. Yeah.
Right.
Like it's not, if we're
Right.
scaling her as a parent as a whole, she's not a 9 or a 10. She's not a 9 out of 10 for sure.
Right.
But in this chapter I thought she was.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, okay, so we see that the meeting sort of breaks up fully and it's mostly just the Kennetiers now and Lucy kind of asks the obvious question which is like, okay, we're about to go and try and attack Charles. What do we do if we get the opportunity? Like, if Charles is standing in front of us, what do we even do? And it seems like a very good question, but Verona assures us that it's fine because luckily, Rook has a plan.
I don't remember exactly where I was, but I'm pretty sure when the first time I read that, I started, like, screaming just, like, really loud and, like, kinda cackling, but mostly just, like, screaming, and whenever that happens, Ben thinks, someone's died in Pale or whatever, and I can't tell him, but I was like, "Ah!" I mean, at first he was like, "What?" And then I was like, "Oh, it's your story." And I was like, because like, it's
Yeah,
so good and so frustrating, and what the fuck is this, and what the fuck is happening, and I love that Lucy
oh.
keeps staring at Hollow Yed next chapter because, like, same, and then he comes up at the end of next chapter, and I was like, "God damn it, what the fuck is
Yeah, there's that moment where like Verona nods at him and he nods back, and I was like, oh, like Wildbow's just fucking with us now. Like this, like fuck you too, Wildbow, because he's just and like I think this is what's funny is we talked about on the podcast when I think it was a few chapters ago we learned that Rook had just left the area,
Mhm,
and it was a bit like, okay, that's a really funny because the fandom has spent a year wondering what Rook is planning, and the idea that she just left and didn't do anything was like funny.
mhm.
Like, probably not the whole story, but I was like, that's funny. And then it's like, this is taking it to the next level where it's like, oh, yeah, Rook just left seemingly without a plan. And now we're doing this shit. And I was just like Wildbow's just fucking with us now. And it's hilarious.
Mhm. And I mean, like, the
Oh,
best I could think of is something something the Kims because we've been, like, speculating about them for a while, and, like, a lot of the plan that they come up with next chapter has to do with, like,
yeah.
countering the Kims in particular or, trying to deal with that, but also just what the fuck?
Honestly, I was like thinking to myself at this point, I wouldn't be shocked if Verona's plan, that is also Rook's plan, is just let everyone think that you have a plan and worry about it and spend power trying to figure out what the plan is, but there is no plan. You're just winging it. Because that kind of feels like an interpretation of what Rook's been doing this whole fucking story is we're all sitting here going, what's Rook's plan? Actually, she doesn't have one. She's just kind of hoping everyone thinks she does.
She's just a good actor. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
because especially, like, the beginning where they're, like, grilling Verona and they're like, "What the fuck is going on?" And Verona's like, "No, literally, there's no plan." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "What?" Like, you
Like,
can't
yeah,
lie. What's happening?
genuinely my best guess, and I don't think this is right, but my best guess is that the plan is just to make Charles worry that there's a plan and spend energy trying to figure it out. Um, yeah, or the plan is just wing it, try and get in a good position and wing it. I mean, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, and then the chapter ends with Avery and the group departing for their big fight. It's a sort of we had this big meeting, everyone was together, and then Avery helps everyone move on out.
I love that they go up through the doors of the Blue Heron, like, the,
Mm,
like, destroyed to shit blue, like, so good. Iconic.
yeah. But yeah, okay, God, this is already a 2-hour episode. Let's get into finish off 24.3.
Woo!
Um, this is a Verona chapter, and we are on a path. Nicolette is doing some augury and shit, trying to figure out what the deal is with the Kim's house, but she's struggling because she can't tell how the paths is affecting all that jazz.
Mhm.
And I thought this was some really fun lore. I love the idea that realms flavor practices like augury. Like it makes sense, and it's fun to speculate like how different realms affect different practices.
Yeah, um, and you note that like, they talk about seekers as kind of like an augury adjacent path
Yeah,
practice, of trying to force what you want out of a path or something, and I don't
yeah.
remember Peter or someone was kinda like, "Yeah, that's a stupid name," and I was like, "That's a great name!" Like, "Fuck you!" Like, Finder Seekers, like, God! Like, so
I don't
good.
know. It doesn't feel like it captures the nuance of how they force. I don't. Yeah, maybe it does. I don't know.
I
I
don't
feel
even
like this.
care.
I
Pathrunners
well
is the
when I
name we
first
should change.
I was like, well, because when I first heard Seekers, I was like, oh, these people who do like what Jessica did in the ruins, but on the paths. Like, are these people who can
Um,
track things in the paths? That would be cool.
yeah.
Um, but anyway, um, I
Yeah.
do think it's funny though the idea of like trying to brute force puzzles by dampening the various kinds of expression of a path. Part of me was like, that feels so antithetical to what the paths are, like what's special about. Um,
Mhm.
so I don't know, but I mean, Avery kind of did seeking in a way to get that crane that let her take the nail out of Marisica. So can't hate it too much.
It's true. In terms of looking at the chat, in terms of the Weepers, like, ruins slash, like, manipulation, emotional manipulation finders. That took me a really long time to say. We
Yeah,
can figure it out. Leapers would be a great path practice.
yeah. Weepers was the term I came up with for the ruins infected goblins in that goblin practice I made up that one day I might use.
Cool, yeah.
Um, So yeah, I like it as a ruins thingy. Um, Also, sorry, there's a moment here where Verona worries that Alexander is uh expiring because he smells a bit like a package of meat that she cracked open. Um, and I just imagine he smells like spam. Um, because that stuff smells gross. And I guess this is the Hawaii talk finally coming back. But I just want to call out spam is weird, but I do have to admit spam masubi was delicious.
Woo!
I try to remember
Yes.
when it was that we had that big argument about spam. I think it was in Witch and Moan,
Oh, possibly.
the April Fools last year.
Or was it when we covered pate?
Oh, maybe it was. Yeah, it might have been Pate. Anyway, yeah, for those who haven't listened to that episode for whatever reason, we had a big fight about spam where Ruben and I were very against it, but turns out spam masubi is delicious.
Yeah, I always think of spam right out of the can as, like, raw spam, and I'm like, "You don't eat raw spam, you have to fry it," but it's not raw, but it does make my
Yeah.
cat excited. She likes pork a lot, but also it smells like cat food, so
Yeah, well, it's probably nutritionally equivalent to cat food. Yeah, what was weird about spam musubi though, it's like because you buy it hot from like a heater in the ABC store, like it's like
Uh-huh,
buying a pie or something from a 7-Eleven. Like it's
uh-huh.
and that's just a weird energy for something that looks like sushi. You know?
It's very yeah.
Like sushi I think of as because it's associated with raw fish, even if I often have like chicken sushi or something. Like, it just feels like something that's meant to be really fresh and it's cool. And it was like seeing these slabs of masubi in a heater at a corner store. I was a
Right,
bit
like,
like,
gas station, yeah.
yeah, it was a bit like, what the fuck is this? But it was nice and it didn't directly make me sick.
Oh, okay. Did you
So
Oh,
yeah.
right, you got COVID.
Oh yeah, I also got a little bit sick for one point during the trip, but
Oh,
I don't think it was anything I ate. I think that was
okay.
just a bug.
Mm.
It was fine. It was minor. It didn't stop me walking up to the top of whatever the big crater near Honolulu. I forget the
Diamond
name of
Head?
it already. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so bad. It's so hard to learn Hawaiian names for people and places, like because they all just sound like big series of like syllables
Syllables.
with lots of vowels in them. Like it's all like it's Waikomo, Waikiki, like
I was gonna
you
say,
know,
especially because half of them start with, like, W, and then
yeah.
a quarter of them start with, like, K. It's very yeah.
Like, and I'm sure other people have this with Australian places, like, Woolloomooloo and Wagga Wagga and Woy Woy sound very different to me, but I could understand somebody who's not Australian being like, which one am I fucking going to? Um, so like I assume it's just which one you've grown up with being comfortable. But like we went to like Iolani Palace and we are learning about like all the Hawaiian kings and queens and stuff, and
Oh,
I did not
mhm.
realize how fucked up that whole situation was and how recent it is.
Yep.
Um, but like it was so hard to keep straight which king or queen they were talking about because they just give their name, and I was like, I'm sorry, like I'm ignorant. All these names kind of blur together for me. Like it's all Kiolani, Kikimani, and stuff, and I was like, I can't remember which one's which.
Yeah, that's fair. It's the first 5 were all Kamehameha, like, they took the name
That's right.
Kamehameha.
Yes.
So, if they're referring to them by that and the number, it's, like, pretty easy, but then the last 3 so then there were 2 other kings and then a queen, and those can get a little bit
Mm.
confusing, but yeah.
Yeah, the last one, like the queen who ultimately got overthrown was like Leolani or something.
Yeah, Lily Uokalani.
Yeah, I had most of the syllables correct. I'm happy
Yep.
with that. My
You
ignorant
just missed a couple, but
ass.
yeah.
Yeah. That was crazy. Even the president of the United States is like, guys, we shouldn't have done this, and they just ignored him until a new president got in and said, "Yeah, we own
It was
Hawaii
like,
now."
"Woohoo."
Nuts.
Yeah.
Um. Anyway, sorry. Getting back to Pale. We're on this path, and Nicolette is giving us like the Ocean's 11 outline of the enemy base, like where all the lasers are, where the security systems are. And there's some discussion of various heist ideas before the gang just decides to literally storm the keep.
Yeah, and these sorts of things are always fun, and especially, like, we're in the middle of a path and there's, like, weird explosions happening, and we're mapping out the heist. It's fun.
Yeah. I agree. Like, and I was getting ready for the heist, and then they're just like, "What if we just fucking don't go subtle at all and just fucking storm in?" Like, there's so many storming puns to be made with this plan. I love it. Um, there's also some great stuff. Like, Verona and Co sort of start to talk to Nicolette, where they're kind of trying to gauge whether she's going to become the new head of the Bellingers or not. Like trying to suss out what her life goals are, what her career is going to be.
Mhm.
Um, and Verona starts to kind of spell out a lot of her own character arc, which I think is going to be a bit of a theme in talking about this chapter. Is I think Verona gets very explicit and overt in how she's grown as a character. But she starts talking about this story she loved as a kid about cats and how cats can be both dependent and independent. And that's what makes cats special. And I love just, well, first of all, that is totally cats. They're dependent as fuck, but also you can't tell them that. But that also is Verona. And I love this as her kind of like being able to look at and evaluate herself like that and like be comfortable with who she is and what she wants. Like, it's just, yeah, there's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of talking like that in this chapter.
Yeah, and the idea of, like, a cat being able to make, like, a choice outside of the binary or whatever is interesting. Like,
Mm.
it seems like there's only 2 options, but, like, you can find a third and,
Yeah,
like, playing into that kind of it's cool.
yeah,
Like
and I think even more than a third, it's like finding a path that walks like both lines. Like, it's like if people are
mm,
telling you there are two paths to walk, a cat will just jump between them. Like, cat doesn't give a fuck. It'll walk wherever it feels like in each step, and like that's sort of Verona's vibe as well.
yeah, as we have a cat on my lap getting tangled in my microphone wire, she's fine. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I've been back to my antagonistic relationship with the cats in this house since returning here. They both what they've figured out is that they can get fed by my sister at 6 a.m., but then still come and wake me up potentially to get a second round of food. Um, So I keep getting woken up and dragged out into the front room only to see a full bowl of food because they don't even fucking finish what they've got before deciding to go for seconds. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty dumb. Um,
Yeah, they're
I'm
not.
really yeah, I'm really lucky that my cat's not food motivated. I mean, part of that is, like, her health problems that are scary, but she will eat, but she does not wake us up in the morning, which is lovely.
Oh, that's the dream.
Yeah.
My door has scratch marks all over it because I closed my door when I left for the 2 weeks, and the cats didn't pick up on the fact that that meant I wasn't in there, so they spent 2 weeks trying to bash my door down. So now I have to get my door painted.
Oh.
um, but yeah, anyway, so a key part of this plan, that you've sort of highlighted in your notes here as well, is they're storming the Kim house, and then they're going to confront Charles and make him spend all his power. Is like that's a shit plan, right? Like, it doesn't he have a lot? Like, that's like being a door to door salesman and being like, I'm going to go to this guy's house and make him spend all his money, and then going to like Bill Gates's house. Like, he's got a lot of money to spend.
Right, but, like,
You,
also if it was, like, he spends money by, like, shooting bullets at you, like
I mean, yeah, but I think what the point is, Charles has a lot of bullets. He's like all Second Amendmented up. Like, I don't know. I like it's just he talked about in 24.a. He was like, if they try to nickel and dime me, I've got millions of dollars. I think was the phrase he used. Like,
Right, I can't it doesn't seem like this I mean, it's probably, like, not a fun storm to be in or whatever, but, like, yeah, what's gonna make him spend all his power? Um,
yeah, I
but
don't
also keep
understand.
the Kims, like, contained? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where Verona stuff with the innocence and the aware comes in. I'm just interested to see. I think the Kennetiers might be underestimating how much they can charge Charles for shit, but I guess we'll see. It wouldn't be the first time that I've been wrong about something like that.
Right. Um, yeah, I'm, like, kind of trying to imagine what is he going to use the power on, especially because he's gonna come back out, presumably, and so he won't have been using power on, like, a defensive perimeter or, like, what drains power? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he's presumably been using a lot to like spawn all these boogeymen and goblins everywhere.
Mhm.
Um, and he like I think he could do what he did with Kennet below and reabsorb them, but at a cost. So like he can lose a lot to the interest of that, but they need to get him to the point where he's desperate enough to recall all of those boogeymen and stuff at that loss. And I'm not convinced that they have a path to get there even. But yeah, maybe I'm underestimating what they're cooking.
Right. I don't know. I never
Yeah.
know. It's always fun to find
Yeah,
out what's happening.
exactly. That's what's great about this world is fucking 4 million plus words into reading stories in this universe. You still can't be sure because everything's so open to interpretation.
Mhm.
Um, oh yeah, and what do we think about Nicolette taking over the Bellingers? Like, are we? I'm asking you in the chat. Are we pro? Are we anti? What are we?
Like,
What are
part
we
of me
vibing?
wants her to be like, "Fuck all of you, I'm better than you, and now I get to, like, prove it." But then she's, like, tied to them forever, but
Yeah,
she also hasn't, she's not even family with them, but she hasn't been like, "No, fuck you all, I'm done." Like, she has, I feel like she has these emotional ties, and also, like, they do have a lot of cool artifacts and shit. I don't know, it's she describes them as, yeah, being important enough to be somewhat influential, but also too much of a mess for anyone to really try to lock down. Um, and so yeah, part of me wants her to like create her own like cool group and surround herself with like cool good people, like take Jillian and BSW and run off into
yeah,
the hills,
same.
but also like I want her to win the Bellingers. I don't know.
But maybe long term she kind of does that by like if her you know, busted up Augur Girls coven of like her, the Bitter Street Witch, and Jillian and stuff. Like if they become even cooler and better than the Bellingers, then it's like the Bellingers have to come crawling back, and you kind of get the best of both worlds. Where she,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
I hope. I kind of I like that solution where she does her own thing because it feels like that cat walks her own way vibe that Verona was spruiking in this chapter of like, you don't have to be the head of the Bellingers, or you don't have to be on your own, or like go start your own coven and like just build something better.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, okay. So Operation Take by Storm is a go. The team lands just a few clicks south of, I don't know what to call it, Charles's Kim house, the Barbie house. Um, anyway, they all land there. There's some others around. They're quickly disposed of, and then we split into 3 teams who all say their goodbyes to each other.
Yeah, now I just picture like Barbie's Malibu beach house. Um
Yeah,
and like are all the Kims super hot? Now I can't get this out of my mind. Like
no, they're like they do everything's lace, so it's like BDSM Barbie house, I think, is how I
no.
picture it. But with like
Oh.
lace instead of leather, but it's all knots and dark lines and stuff. So
Okay.
um yeah, like American Horror Story meets Barbie Malibu house.
Perfect.
um but yeah, so yeah, Verona is almost almost killed immediately, but does get saved.
I do love how yeah, Macaulay and Lucy it's just I don't know, they're such good eggs and like they're so much more similar in some ways. Um and they look over and yank Verona out of there and then Macaulay's like, "Oh, like, you saved Verona first and like it's not a competition. Are you saying that I don't even compete with you? Like, is that what you're saying?" Like, and it's really fun, and I want Lucy to have fun with it, like, even a little bit, and she's just not
Yeah.
doing
Well, it's like that's that like it's one of like so Lucy has like a couple of I would just describe them as like blind spots, and one of them is like people joking around with something serious, and she's gotten better at it because she's best friends with Verona, so you fucking have to. Um, but like yeah, like we've seen this as well. I think like another one of Lucy's blind spots is kind of her recognition for like soft power. Um,
Hmm.
and it's just so funny watching her deal with combat practitioners where like a huge chunk of their personality is built around recognizing soft power and like not taking these sorts of situations quite as seriously as other people would. And Lucy just it doesn't get it. It's like her version of how Avery people keep being like, Avery, are you plotting stuff? And Avery's just like, what is planning? Like this is Lucy. Like Lucy's just like, what is humor? And like she just she gets it sometimes. We've seen her slowly work into it with the dogs at times, but it's just always funny watching her try to deal with these people who she just doesn't get that way of interacting in a serious situation.
Right, and I mean, it is a serious situation, and she is right that, like, they definitely shouldn't let dumb shit like that get in the way, and if this was, like, Easton and, whatever, he wouldn't be he'd be, like, feeling really insecure and, like, all this stuff, like, she's
Yeah.
right, but also, like,
Yeah.
please have fun, Lucy, a little bit.
And I think there's probably even an argument to be made that like having or not taking it so seriously might actually be like I could see the spirits being like, oh, like Anthem's so casual. Like, Anthem has the thing where he like tackles the thing and then he's like, oh, my sock got wet. And there's an element to that of like he's not taking it seriously, like he's too OP for this. And I
Mm,
could see
mhm.
that like being a vibe someone goes for. That said, there's probably just as much cachet behind Lucy's like fucking serious vibe as well. So it's probably just like a pick your poison sort of thing. But like I could see Macaulay specifically aiming for like not taking it seriously because like that lends you some power in a way.
Right. Speaking of Anthem, he talks about thinking that something like wasn't sentient or whatever. Um and says like and that's not me being a prejudiced practitioner either, I'm reasonably sure. And it's just a fun example of him like, he's like checking his privilege. Like he's like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
like I learned things in this like rehabilitative class and I am improving as a person and that just made me like so happy. Um
Yeah, like because then there's a bit later he uses the term subhuman, and Lucy's like, "Hey, can we not? Like that's an offensive term now." And he's like, "Oh," and she's like, "Can you call them odd folk?" And he's like, "Oh, odd folk, sure." And it's like that moment where it's like, okay, he's still learning, but like look at him go. Like,
Right, and
what a guy.
Anne is immediately like, "Oh my god, we can't call them subhuman, how me, me, me." And it was just like, "God damn it." Like, okay.
Anne and Deb are on well, so more so Deb in this chapter, but,
Oh,
like,
shit.
Deb is on fire in more ways than one in this chapter. She's a delight to read.
It's so painful.
I
Um,
love the part where I think it's, like, later on it's after the bit where they, like, coordinate the flame things, and Deb is like, "That was a good plan, Ellingson. You could enunciate it better next time," and it's just like, she's just so insufferable, but also part of me was like, I think that's as good. Like that's, that's Deb. That's as good as you're going to get from Deb. That's Deb saying, "Wow, you're really good."
right, like, I mean, well, it's funny because you mentioned earlier that she says to Anne, like, "Oh, let's like the usual," and that's like, like fun and inside, but also like vague and no one else knows what the fuck you're talking about. And
Yeah,
like criticizing Lucy for like trying to be discreet and efficient in her communication styles. Um, which like a dog of war immediately gets, but like Nicole gets it. Like she has to, say,
yeah.
oh, 7 o'clock or whatever, like, a little
It's
bit
not.
more than just like hand, hand, hand. But like Nicole fucking gets it. And Deb's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Like,
Yeah. Well, like, so the idea of like 7 o'clock, like that's not an esoteric thing. If somebody's like, "There's somebody at your 7 o'clock," I
mm-hmm,
know what that means.
mm-hmm.
Like Lucy, like, and I think that's what's funny is like Deb doesn't even try to argue that it was unclear nomenclature because I think she realized that she was being a fucking idiot. So she blames Lucy for enunciating it wrong, which is like, that ain't it, Deb. Like, like I just, it's so petty. I love her energy in this chapter. She's just so petty.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, like like I guess it's funny because like Deb in this moment with Lucy is like an even worse version of what we were just talking about with Macaulay. Like Lucy struggles, I think, to work with Macaulay a bit, but like what's even worse is someone like Deb, where it's just like Lucy just doesn't have time for that petty coup counting bullshit. Like she's like I absolutely don't need feedback on my enunciation. Just take the L.
Right. Well, and then even Verona, who loves to, have fun, is like completely over their shit, right? Like when, like thinking about how Deb's being bossy and Nicole's like, well, you're not in charge. And like, like and being like it's so much better to have people who can like work together. And then
Yeah,
I think that's what made me think of Miss Ferguson and how uh
yeah. Where is she?
where is she? Um But it's funny to see, like, I mean, it feels like everyone is sick of their bullshit, which is kind of refreshing and fun.
I love
Um,
Verona's thing, like, at the end, like, we'll get to, like, all the stuff that happens in the dropped call, but I love how they kinda get there and they're like, "Are you ready to go?" And Deb's like, "Yes, but only if I can be excused for this not being as good
holy
as my regular work." And she just needs this recognition that she could do better, and,
oh
like,
my
I think
god.
Verona's not capable of talking, and Zed is, like, fucking excused to just, like you could just imagine everyone being like, "Shut the fuck up and push the goddamn button." Like, it's so good.
Verona Verona's just so, like, taken aback, but also, like, just angry and, like, yeah, confused and,
Yeah.
like, what the fuck? And I like, it was a reminder that Zed is more in the practitioner establishment because, he thinks it's stupid, but also is kinda just like, "Yep, it's fun," like, plays
Yeah, yeah.
into it. It
Shut up,
God.
go, go, go. Well, I think Verona's just pulled 6 feet of cord out of her stomach, so she's also just yeah.
Oh,
But we'll
totally.
get we'll get there because I wanna talk about that a lot.
God.
Um, I know, I'm sorry in
No,
advance. Um,
I hate her so much.
um, yeah, like, you've got another Verona bit in the notes that I really wanna talk about, which is this part where Verona thinks of the fact that Jasmine is the one who's put this limit on how much they can fight on them. And she's like, "I don't wanna tell Lucy and Avery because they'll see it as a betrayal when it isn't."
Right.
And that feels like a huge moment from Verona.
Yeah, especially, like, her magic and her freedom and her ability to do this stuff is super important to her, and I'm trying to remember of when exactly it's been like, she doesn't want the parents to take their magic away, And she's kinda gotten through that by being like, "Well, I have, like, magical items and it'll be fine." But she's straight up like, "No, if I was in the parents' position, I would be trying to stop Lucy and Avery from fighting too." Um,
Yeah.
and she thinks about all the ways they've been, like, totally hurt. She doesn't actively think about her hand and, like, but her hand does, like, you know, twinge horribly as she's thinking about it to remind us, and so she's not focused on, "I could die," but, yeah, I don't know, it feels really mature to be able to be like, "No, like,
I see the parents' logic, like,
r
yeah.
right, like, we still need to do this," but also they'd be in a way, they'd be bad parents if they were like, "Cool," like
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's, like, a big moment for Verona because, like, we talked about it a bit this episode already, but, like, Verona has obviously a very complicated, piecemeal, unique relationship with the concept of parenting. Her
Mhm,
relationship with the concept of parenting hasn't always been positive, so it is a bit of a moment for her to side with the very restrictive, boundary imposing side of parenting. Like, for her to say, "I think Jasmine I kind of agree with her,"
mhm,
or I would be doing the same in her shoes. Oh, like it matters, I think, coming from Verona, and like she's become a bit of a light parent of sorts to people like Peckersnot. You could even argue Gillette. Like, I think,
mhm,
there's the talk of Charles making life and then tearing it apart. Verona specifically didn't do that with Gillette.
mhm,
Um, like it, like Verona's not a full time parent or anything, but she's taken aspects of parental roles on for various others. And she's just gone through losing some of her friends who were people that she was helping grow into full human beings. Like was Mal was completely useless when she started, and by the time Verona was done with her, Mal was only like 80% useless. Like that was, something Verona did. And but yeah, this is one of Pale's major themes, especially since arc 13, I think, is like the nature of growth and the line between being an adult and being a child, being a parent, being a kid. Like this is something Pale's been exploring, and so it's a big moment for Verona to kind of cross that threshold for one of the first big times and be very parental in a way she's not normally receptive to on her end, and be like, "Oh, I can see the value of that side of parenting that I usually hate."
mhm.
Yeah, like I guess a big thing in this chapter I feel like is we're seeing really like final form Verona, maybe not final form, but like this is very much a Verona who's grown a lot in the story, and this chapter I think is demonstrating that through moments like this. Where it's like, okay, yeah, this is a Verona who interacts with the concept of parenting in a way that she couldn't have done before.
Yeah,
And so I also think that's interesting because Avery and Lucy at the moment, whenever I read their chapters, I'm kind of like, oh wow, I feel what Jasmine's talking about because I feel like both of them are becoming really desensitized and too comfortable with violence. Like Jasmine's been talking about that a lot, and I think we are seeing it in both Lucy and Avery chapters. What's fun is in this Verona chapter, I almost got the opposite vibe. It's like this is Verona's very traumatized. She suffered massive losses in this war, and it's kind of making her almost balance out the other two. She's the one who's a bit more inclined now than she would have been an arc ago, I think, to kind of take a step back and be like, "Oh, like, we do we need to think about stuff like this?" Like, I
mhm,
like Verona is almost thinking more clearly in this awful situation than she might have been without it. Like I remember Jessica used to comment that that was the part of Verona that scared her in Arc 7 was that Verona was almost more focused when her life was on the line. And like I guess it's just interesting, like, because Verona is the Kenneteer who got a lot of benefit out of just diving into Kennet below and like putting her life on the line, and she came out of it better.
mhm.
And like, there's almost an argument to be made, like, that this war is having a similar effect, whereas while it's damaging Lucy and Avery, I mean, I would never say this has been a good experience for Verona, obviously, but there's like, it's not all bad. I don't really know what point I make it. It feels like Pale's exploring more than just like, I don't know, war traumatic and bad. There is this element with Verona of like, it's leading her to clearer thoughts in some regards, which is not all negative. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's good, but it's like, there's nuances to it, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do with, like, Verona's the first person in this section of the story to, like, lose people who are close to her. Like,
Yeah.
Lucy lost John, which is hugely defining, Um, but also, like, that was John's choice. Like, that was John's fucking, like, big dumb decision or whatever to, like, go. And I
Yeah,
think
she
that,
tried to talk him out of it.
right, she was fighting John to not do the thing that everyone was saying would happen. Um, and, her response is, like, to keep fighting Charles. And Verona's response is, like, also, "Fuck Charles, he has to, like, go down," but, like, her friends died, um, and I don't know that Lucy and Avery have really had that same thing yet, because, like, Verona isn't thinking, you know, like, "I could fucking die, like, I could lose my hand, like, oh my like, this is scary, and I'm traumatized from,
Yeah.
like," you know, and thinking about my own mortality. It's like, I'm worried about Avery and Lucy, but, like, her friends dying, I think is kinda, like, maybe more of a, "I could fucking die," creeping in,
Yeah.
and it's like, Avery, with her whole "I was almost shot," is still kind of externalizing, like, not thinking about it, like Verona in her hand, uh,
Mm.
I think.
Yeah, like, I still worry that Avery is not confronting her problems around maintaining connections and overcommitting herself. Lucy's obviously walking up and down the line of becoming too affiliated with violence, and I think she's going to be fine, but it's like a valid concern,
Yeah,
especially recently.
yeah.
I guess Verona's just interesting because it almost feels like she's the one who's always struggled with moderation and like not taking things too far. And yet, in this whole thought process about the parents maybe being right or having a point, that's kind of what she's doing better than she's ever done in the past. Is she's sort of like, yeah, well, if I was, if I was gainsaid and didn't have my tools or whatever, I would say like stop here. Like, we need to, know our limits and that sort of thing. Like, it's just it's one of those ways Verona has grown, and she's also comfortable enough with herself to consider a version of her that doesn't have power, which that thought used to terrify her.
Mm,
She was so
mhm.
insecure about that sort of thing. So it's just like, in so many ways, this ability to take that step back and look at the parents and process these things just feels like something that is a thing Verona at various points in the story could not have done.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. Little short thing just about Verona, she makes 2 marks on her cat mask with a knife, and part of me remembers, I mean, they used to mess with their masks more in terms of, like, giving them night vision and crap, um,
yeah,
and I mean, we she was just thinking about Ansem and Mal. Meow. And so I was, and they're in, like, the Kennet below section, and so I was like, "Is this, like, a mark of, like, these are my friends that died?" Or, like, was it something to, like, affect her practice or what? I couldn't remember.
yeah. Because she does 4 marks on her mask. She does two across her eyes and then two in the Kennet below portion, which I think you're bang on that there might be Anselm and Mal little memory things. Like, I think that's a great call. I don't know what the two on her eyes were for though.
Yeah. I don't know.
Um, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, Verona is coordinating her team, which is team back lines, the opposite of front lines. And they're basically laying the groundwork for starting up the storm. And I just low-key love this idea that we've got the Kennetys breaking into their 3 teams, and each one's kind of built around their aspect of their
Their
dynamic
thing,
as a
mhm.
trio. Yeah, like, because I imagine what's going to happen. Like, I haven't read 14.4 and 14.5, but I know one's an Avery and one's a Lucy chapter. Um, so I'm imagining that we get like a chapter for each of them, like in their teams, and it'll be really cool to see like how they work with their dynamic writ large
Mhm.
like this, and then presumably all meeting at the end to then start synergizing as they storm the actual house. But yeah, um, I also wanted to call out like again another big Verona moment here. She's like a team leader, maybe coordinator is a better term for it because she's not like a super active leader, but I guess like again, Verona hasn't always been captain teamwork.
Mhm.
Um, but she nails it here. Like, and I think the thing is this team that's been put together is like exactly her jam. It's this diverse group of people with a diverse set of skills, and her whole thing as a sorceress is she wants to understand a fair amount of all practices. And what she's able to do as a part of that is with all these people, she can kind of keep tabs on what everyone's doing. Like everyone can say, I'm doing X, and she understands enough about their practice to get it. She can coordinate them best. She pairs people up. Like she's like, okay, Mr. Knox is putting together a barrier. Well, Melody and Corbin can help with that. Like,
Mhm.
then because of her own flexibility, she can cover the gaps that no one else can. So she makes that like water suction up thingo because they're melting all the snow. Like it's like this perfectly Verona-esque form of teamwork where it's this diverse group of people all kind of doing their own thing, and her thing is just keeping tabs on them all, knowing enough to understand, help them synergize, and fill in the gaps. Like it's different to how Avery would do teamwork, but it's perfect for Verona and it works for this group of people. It's great. It's a cat walking its own way teamwork wise. I love it.
Yeah, and, like, it's amazing that I mean, she seems to be very much in charge, um, which is
Yeah.
cool.
Well, don't
Like
tell Deb.
right, but also she God, like and part of it is, like, yeah, like, the coordination and all of that stuff, but just I I'm an adult, and that's weird. Like, I still don't have kids, and so I still don't really think of myself as, like, a capital A adult, but I'm, like, twice as old, like, more than twice as old as
Sure.
Verona, and it feels wild to be like, "Ah, yes, I will now listen to this 14-year-old." And, like,
That's very true.
I think I would, like, they've they've dealt with these people enough, they've had a lot of, like,
Yeah.
meetings and, whatever, like, yes, but it also does feel wild that, like, all of these, like, stuck-up practitioner assholes are listening.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, I am just trying to imagine myself taking orders at work from a 14-year-old, and it would definitely take me a bit to take them seriously, I think.
Right. Um, and just, like, good for them, I don't know. It's great.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm kind of excited to see if like Lucy and Avery's chapters kind of mirror this with their own specific flavors of what teamwork and coordination looks like for their teams. Because
Mhm.
it's like it's their own dynamic, but also they're coordinating a bunch of people inside of their dynamic. So it's like, yeah, like Verona's was this buzzing storm of people doing a million things at once because that's kind of how her mind operates. She connects all those weird
Mm,
dots on the source. Whereas I could see Lucy being much more just like kind of leading a charge of a group of people because she's just gonna like you know dive right in and go for the throat, but
right.
not in the connectiony way.
Mm,
And then Avery will just be zipping about, I imagine. But
yeah.
yeah, oh, I also you already called it out, but like while we're talking about Verona and being able to work as a team, I do love this bit where Nicole Scobie is like, "Oh, the ground is drying off," and Verona thinks to herself, "Okay, Nicole isn't as good a practitioner as Deb, but like she's so much easier to work with because she's actually communicating with the team."
Mhm.
And I was like, that is so fucking funny coming from like you can imagine somebody saying that to Arc 12 Verona. Like that was the Verona who kept not communicating with Lucy and Avery and trying to pull big stunts. And I like it again, a little moment of character growth for Verona that she's better at teamwork now that she can be like, this is how to communicate with the team.
Oh, yeah. Um, I decided on a new practice that I want to do in this chapter. Um,
Oh
and I
yeah.
don't even know what it is. Um, but I'm really into the Kirstad's. Um, I
Oh,
think
they're
that
like
it's
yeah.
well, I just like it's so meta and like I hope that I would understand the practice enough to be able to do this, but the idea of like my practice is studying the practice and like trying to do it better is like really cool. And like you could like,
Yeah.
learn about so many different types of things and you're like not big enough of a threat. Like you don't have to be like you're not this like family people necessarily want to take down. Like you could really like do good with collaborating and like you are a collaborator. You can't do anything by
Yeah.
yourself, which is limiting, but also I don't know, just like this
Kind of
sounds
cool.
cool.
Yeah. It sounds like I can see why they were at the Blue Heron because they sound like exactly the sort of people Alexander would have loved to work with. That was like the
Uh-huh.
aspect of collaboration he was all about was like you bring them in and everything just gets a little bit better. Like that's sick.
Right.
Um
And they could really benefit from learning about all the different types of shit.
yeah. Because I remember because these were established as their practices in like arc 6 and 7, like when they were at the Blue Heron with the
Mhm.
Kenneteers, and I didn't really get how it would work in practice, but like seeing it now, you're kind of like, yeah, it's a really cool one, and I love the idea of just having that general skill of like, yeah, I can make everything work longer, or be a little bit more powerful or subtle or something. Like that's so
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, and
Um,
yeah, just like, here's this teen girl, and she's gonna help this, like, adult man
yeah,
with his, like, wording diagram to make it just a little bit better. Like, it just I don't know, it's great.
yeah, yeah. Um, But yes, unfortunately, their prep is interrupted when an old friend drops in. Pause for laughter. Verona is almost dragged into the Matrix as a part of this. And yeah, I noticed Malia's notes on this section were quite short. But I'm sorry, I have to talk about it. This was so fun.
No, I yeah, part of it is that I feel like, I have a tendency to talk too much, and I was worried about, um, it getting too long, and I was like, "Oh, action, perfect, I don't have to say much about this because then"
No, that's fair. I mean,
uh
relative to the word count, we are going to cover this quite quickly because that is what happens with action. But yeah, this was very. I mean, no actual spoilers. This was pactish, if you ask me. Like this was
Oh,
intense.
yeah. That is a vibe.
Um, the I love the way the pipes feel like leeches because they numb
Ew, ew.
you when they go in, so they're like digging into you, and you don't notice them, you don't feel it. Like, so great.
Ugh.
And Verona pulling 6 feet out of
Oh
it.
my
Like
god.
the body horror in this bit was fantastic.
Ugh.
I was all about it.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that this just made me feel really worried and upset.
I was giggling the whole time. I was loving
That's
it.
bizarre, okay. I was
I
so
love the
afraid for
part.
Verona.
I love the part where they have to cut off Gillette's leg too. Um, oh no! The best part was when they're trying to get Verona out, and Gillette starts cutting the wire and reaches the point where she hits the electric part of the wire and like gets an electric shock. And it was like this moment of like, oh yeah, that makes sense actually. That way we should have seen that coming.
Gillette's great.
Why
It's
does she
very
have a
fun.
knife inside her? That's so.
It's so her.
It's so yeah, it's so Verona as an other. Like I love that Gillette is the Verona who embraced being an other.
Uh-huh.
Like yeah, I think there's a lot of fun actually stuff to compare with like the way Gillette feels like like somebody who could become a summoner but in a good way, unlike a certain
Hmm.
other ex summoner who I won't name specifically. Um, but like Gillette is really engaging with this concept of analyzing people as like pieces of stuff and like what you're built up
Mm.
out of, and that's very much. I think Charles views the world in a very similar way as a summoner, so I kind of am hoping Gillette and Charles get to have a chat at one point because I feel like Gillette is Charles but good.
Oh, I love that, yeah.
And also, like, I think Gillette and Charles could get along because we know that Verona and Charles kind of do. So, like, Gillette is like a even more Charles esque Verona, just without the shit personality.
I wonder, like, what Gillette's life plan is and if she's thought about it much. Like, one thing that could be cool about the Kenneteer's new mode is if it allows for more others to practice. Like,
Mm, mm,
we've seen the Kims and, the I would say, like, the Growbards with their, like, weird
yes,
doll children. Like, there are
like blurring
examples
the
of
line.
right, and I mean, we saw, like, Matthew kind of go the other way, but I'm wondering, like, could Juliet practice, and, like, would she want to? How would that work? Because it seems like, if, uh, like, Toad Swallow couldn't, like, become a practitioner, uh, because reasons, but,
Yeah,
it'd be cool, yeah, if Juliet
yeah.
could or whatever.
I agree. I think that's hopefully as we're talking about softening the edges of the seal and breaking down these hard definitions, hopefully these lines between practitioner, other, and stuff are like a part of that. And I think the way they're bringing in the aware and kind of disrupting the concept of innocence as a part of that is hopefully like the start of that. But yeah, I agree. I think that would be another target I think they should be tackling, is this idea that only practitioners have full access to the practice.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um,
I
oh,
yeah,
yeah, what a good section. Just
yeah.
and like the others that they got from Basil and Basil's mum
Ugh,
are like clutch here. Like the Type Tac Kitty obviously saves the
so
day,
good.
and leads to a funny moment of Verona panically screaming "Kitty," which, like, out of context, like, that's just something she might yell at random times. Um, but there's like the one that's building like a big snake or something, and like the dropped call seems terrified of it, and we know
Yep.
that Ray specifically told them to bring these guys. So you kind of see here, it's like, what can these things do? They're like little memes that apparently terrify something big like the dropped call, and that's so funny.
Mhm. Yeah, I it was very fun seeing them. And it just like the Type Tap Kitty and Countdown Cassandra, like
Yeah.
it was so good seeing them free again. Like back, like I don't know. I hope they stay good.
Yeah.
Um I did want to draw out the line. Sometimes these things that just make me so happy, I don't have a ton to say about, but I really want to pull out. And Alexander has a wire sticking into the top of his head, and it says, "He was smirking smugly, a just as I planned expression on his face. He had not planned this." Like,
I love that Verona felt that that needed clarification. Like, it's like that's how injured she is by this. It's like she needs to mentally think to herself that he had not planned this. It's like, we figured. That's so funny.
yeah, and just Alexander, the just as I planned, so good.
But yeah, so the gang escaped the dropped call, thanks to Zed Swiss cheesing it, which, he's meant to be into other kinds of cheeses, but whatever. They get out of there, and he checks in with. So Verona checks in with Clementine, and we learn a little bit more about what Verona is planning? Question mark.
Yeah, another fun line. She could see Hollow Yen over by the trees. She gave him a nod, got a nod back. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, fuck you, Albo,
Fuck
in the nicest
you,
possible way. You know what I mean. You're doing this on purpose. That's the reaction you want. Don't tell me otherwise. Um, yeah. Uh,
Ugh.
Clem's also here. That's nice.
Oh, she's so good.
Doesn't she always just brighten up the story? I don't exactly know what it is, but whenever Clem's in a scene, I'm like, oh, this is just nice.
She's so good, and I feel like, you know, I mean, I've thought that Clem should be, like, told the truth or whatever, like, whether or not she chooses to become a practitioner, like, I think it would benefit her, and so we're moving in the direction where they can just sit her down and be like, "Yeah, this is what's up," and that's so
Yeah,
exciting to me, like,
I
ugh.
agree. Again, another one of those things that's sort of been like simmering all story, um, is like Clem and whether we should let her in. And I love that Kennet has seemingly said yes. Although, again, I wonder, does this mean Plex is going to be a thing? I was really excited for Plex, and now part of me is like, does Plex exist in a world where the Aware know what's up? Is Plex a
Hmm.
prequel before the end of Pale? Anyway,
Mm.
sorry, that's an aside. Okay, Wildbow's
Thanks, Melba.
posting zipper mouths, so that's not helpful. um, yeah, I also love, like, I think we have already touched on it, but just again, the idea of, like, using the Aware like this. So the part of Verona's plan that we do learn here is that basically they're going to get the Aware to send the Innocents in, which insulates them from the responsibility of breaking the Innocents, which is hilarious. Something Bristow used to do, which I think is funny. Um, it also kind of reminded me of like the way Marcy used the Forsworn, because the whole point of the way Mariska used the Forsworn is it was like they get overlooked. And the crux of the Kenneteers plan here is essentially the Aware have been overlooked by the Seal. Like they're a way for us to sneak past all the rules and limits because Aware can get away with shit that practitioners can't. And
Hmm.
that's effectively what the concept of a blackguard is like
Mhm.
practitioners use them to lie. So it's like really weaponizing the loophole that Aware are. And I just love the two birds one stone aspect of like, yeah, like the Aware are a problem caused by the Seal, but we're going to use them to fix that problem. It's great.
Yeah. It's I I don't know how Wildbow does stuff, you know?
Yeah,
How does he
I know.
how does he think of it? How does
It's
it come
come together
together?
so well.
I know.
This is one of the things, like, if we get to interview him again, I really want to ask, like, how these pieces come to, because Pale wasn't meant to get here at the start, as far as I'm aware. So, like, when does
Right.
this stuff come to? Anyway, one day, hopefully, we'll get to ask him. But yeah, I think the other thing that jumped out to me here, though, is like the Kennetys have sort of said in these two chapters, we're trying to mess with the seal. We want to, like, soften its edges, kind of make parts of it redundant, like make Charles redundant was a part of their plan. Like, they are intentionally fucking with the seal, and we've seen Charles specifically label Mossa as an enemy of the seal in the past, and that
Mm.
seemingly gave him extra power to fuck with Mossa specifically. So I'm a little bit worried Charles can do that to the Kenneteers now.
Mm, that's a bad thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's always funny when Charles does that because he's also an enemy of the seal. So it's kind of funny watching him hypocritically be like, "Well, you're an enemy of the seal because you're not fighting it the way I like." Um,
Mhm.
but I think he can, so that's concerning.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
Also, sorry, we do end the chapter with Verona, this newly grown up Verona, who I've been talking about how much character growth she went through and how she's better at moderation now. Look at Clem's puzzle box and think, what happens if I stick that in the horror house? Which is just a bonkers plan, right? Like,
I
that's crazy.
can't even I don't even yes. I don't to be honest, I don't remember the puzzle bracelet box that much, but it feels like it'll be wild.
it made it made extra rooms in her apartment for her to store stuff, so it
Yeah.
fucks with
Okay.
space.
Okay.
And, like, the concept of horroring is that space is already maximally fucked up. So it's just like it feels like that's throwing a match into a barrel of oil, sort of like that's a bad plan. I
Uh-huh.
feel like. So
Ugh.
yeah, I'd toss the puzzle bracelet into the house after everyone else has escaped, personally. But yeah. Anyway, that's our two chapters. Do you have anything else to quickly mention, Malia?
Um, no.
Cool. Sorry to put you on the spot there. I just didn't want
No, thank you.
to move on. Yeah, I quickly wanted to pull out a pale predictor thing before we do move on to. We're going to do a back to pact before people turn their things off. So
Woo!
that'll be quick though, I promise. But
Uh-huh.
before we do, pale predictor, I just wanted to call out this prediction from Min Min, who is essentially predicting that Rook is still around and she's residing inside Hollow Yen.
So
And
insane.
there's, like, a lot of stuff here about, like, that's why he's called Hollow Yen, because Rook, as part of her fucking with him, was creating a box to put herself in, because
Oh,
her and boxes are a whole thing. Um, and so basically, like, yeah, Rook is now undercover inside Hollow Yen and is going to use Hollow Yen to do shit on the sly because no one takes Hollow Yen seriously. Um, and they then pulled out a bunch of the quotes from 24.2, which point out that there's nothing that Holoyan says that directly counteracts this idea. Um, so yeah, I love this. This is the kind of batshit insane theory that is technically plausible. That is my favorite kind of speculation.
yeah, this is I completely believe this now. This is amazing.
This is perfect tinfoil. I love it.
Yeah. Um, I was scrolling through and just wanted to shout out one from Jarlzarl because it makes me happy. And it's just that like Gashwad will be crucial to defeating the Alair Forsworn or like whatever. Like he'll, you know, be stab
Right? Yeah.
someone with a shit. Like they'll use one of the shivs and he'll come out and just be great. And it just makes me so happy. Like Gashwad's insane, and I love it.
Yeah, I feel like we've got to do more with Gashwad still. Like, he's just yeah. Anyway, sorry. I think I've talked about that at length on this podcast, so I'll shut up. But yeah, I love
Uh,
Gashwad.
he's
Show us
great.
what your weapon form is, you coward. Um, cool. Well, yeah, that's the episode. We'll do a quick outro and then we'll go back to Pact. But yeah,
Woohoo!
no discussion question because I'm recording the next episode in 24 hours. So what would be the point?
Woohoo!
Bit more of a holiday. I mean, everyone's meant to have been reading Pact and listening to Pale in Comparison. if you've not read Pact yet. So that's still your homework.
Yes. Do it.
Um, we're also on Twitter at Power Reflectcast. We've actually been posting memes again, and I'm not just saying that for once. There's actually been memes posted, so go check it out.
Yeah, and you should also check out our website, doofmedia.com, where you can learn about all the cool pods that are happening. Word on the street is that Kingslingers will be starting to cover it soon, which is a big
Ooh.
deal in a couple weeks, I think. So, um, if you need more stuff to listen to, there's more on there.
Yes, there's also our Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia. That's how we can do this podcast. That's how we get the time to do it. It's how we get the resources. All of the Power Reflections money that comes into that is going straight into All Packed Up too. Um, so yeah, like that's the way to support the show and help make All Packed Up 2 even crazier.
Yes, and speaking of Patreon, Wildbow has Patreon, and you should support him and give him money as he is finishing off this story, or he'll shove you full of horrifying wires. I can't. I don't have one. Elliot, do you have one?
Something about how the Kennetiers are incentivizing people to do good things in their new system, and that involves giving Wildbow all of your money.
Yes.
All of it.
Hmm.
Bankrupt yourself. Probably not though. Don't go that far. But if you can afford to give him anything, do it. Um,
Yes.
anyway, let's go back to Pact.
Woo!
I'll let you go first, Maya, because you're the one who wrote something here.
This is sort of nothing, but I thought it was funny. Um when they're going around practitioners at the meeting and they'll say who they are and what their practice is. And so Sebastian says, Sebastian Harless, contracts. And Galbard says, what do you contract with? And he says, no, I mean I write and handle contracts. And I was like, why is that the question? And then I was like, oh, you know what you fucking write contracts with in the other verse? Demons? Like, is contractor, or, like, is this a euphemism that Diabolists use? And
I,
that's hilarious. And why?
I, yeah, I think they use that term for other practices as well. Like, it's definitely a euphemism Diabolists use, but I think other people would say they contract with like incarnations and that sort of thing. I think.
Hmm.
I do think it would be funny if Sebastian accidentally implied that he was a Diabolist, because he's just doesn't have that energy. He's too much of an Eeyore. They'd eat him alive.
Oh, that'd be so bad. Um, yeah, and there have been a couple things throughout uh this conversation that has reminded me. Um, Mostly like Juliet having a knife in her is like very Blake, but yeah,
Yeah,
did you
yeah.
have any things that stood out?
I don't. So this is a half formed thought, and I'm just kind of spitballing it here because it's a little bit pact related. But I've been like slightly working on something that I might try and publish on the Reddit at some point, just about like what changes in the other verse and all that, and like comparing the Abyss and the Paths, because I feel like Pact
Hmm.
is very Abyss and Charles is very Abyss, but then Pale is, well, Kennet is very Pathy.
Hmm.
Um, and there's some synergy stuff there I want to talk about with like the three Kennets. But I guess I'm interested to bounce ideas off people who are still here about how the ruins could fit into that thing. Like
Hmm.
if the paths are all about change the good way, the Kennet way, the like grow yourself way and explore your own interests, and Kennet below is very abyssal sort of, but the Kennetiers made it like good abyssal. Um, does that mean, is there a way to map the ruins to Kennet above? That's what I've been trying to do as part of this write up, and I don't have a good idea. There's some stuff there about the ruins. It's like, yeah, it's stagnation from as a desert, or like there's like a memory side to it. But that's what I'm trying to see, if I can make the ruins map to Kennet above, because then it turns everything into trios of change and stuff, and that's nice for Pale.
Are those the three? Like, are there any other changey, recycly realms as far as we know of?
No, I think they're the three big ones. I think it's the ruins for immaterial, the abyss for material, and then the paths for whatever they don't even fucking want. Um, so I think the ruins is kind of meant
Hmm.
to sit opposite the abyss, and
Mhm.
that's why I want to put it as Kennet above because that sits opposite Kennet below, and then you've got Kennet found kind of on the side of them. So
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I do think the paths are associated with recycling, but I don't know how much I want to get deep into that now. But yeah, I don't know. So I'm trying. If people have suggestions, DM me, at me, whatever, on making the ruins map to Kennet above. That would really help me feel like I've completed a triangle, which is what you want to do in Impale analysis. I reckon is figure out how it's a triangle.
I mean, this doesn't this okay, I don't know what this is, but the ruins, from what I remember, aren't all bad. Like,
Yeah,
there's, like, the
there's different
sad
sections.
part and, like, maybe potentially, like, even a happy part, and, like, Kennet above, I mean, I guess all the Kennets have bad and good things or whatever, but, like, just like real life has, uh, good parts and bad parts and happy parts and sad parts, and maybe that's, it's not just we have, uh, I don't even know.
Yeah, yeah. My brain's too dead. We've been talking for too long for me to try and be clever anymore. So yeah, sorry to leave it on a weird endpoint like that potentially, but yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for listening, people. We still don't have an outro for this section.